Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to 83 Weeks, and we are live at 83weeks.com, and it is Wednesday, January 15th, 2025, as we're catching up with our favorite Hall of Famer, the only man to put Vince McMahon on his ass. Not once, not twice, but 83 weeks in a row. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eric Bischoff. Eric, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. It's the middle of January. And I was out, took my dog for a hike in a t-shirt. It's like 45 degrees. And 45 degrees in Wyoming in January it's feels like, that's a pet peeve of mine, but it's a feels like temperature of 75 or 80. It's awesome. Awesome.
Well, we are fired up to be here with you. We are indeed live here in the middle of January, just a couple hours before AEW Dynamite live from Cincinnati. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications bell. You don't want to miss us the next time we're live. Our topic today, we'll be doing a watch along from way back when. Can't believe this is real. January 11th, 1999. And I know what you're thinking. What happened January 11th, 1999? It's the 1 week fallout, if you will, from the finger poke of doom. So that went down a week prior. What did they do the next Nitro? Everybody talks about what happened on the finger poke of doom Nitro, but nobody talks about how you followed it up. What happened the very next week? Eric, we've never watched this. Do you remember off the top of your head what you guys did 1 week removed from the finger poke of doom?
No, but I'd wager a bet that the ratings for that show after the Finger Poke of Doom did not reflect anything other than interest from the audience. I know the dirt sheet universe, the hardcore universe, it wasn't really like an internet wrestling universe back then. It was like the cutting edge of it. Everybody in that world was upside down, but the general viewing audience didn't have the same reaction, and I would bet that the ratings reflect it. Could be wrong.
Well, we're going to be talking a good bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly from Nitro from 1999. So if you haven't already, we want you to watch along with us on Peacock. Go ahead and start getting your Peacock app ready. Look for Nitro. It's season 5, episode 2. That's what they call it in Peacock nomenclature, if you will. It's Nitro season 5, episode 2. Let's talk about more current stuff. Just talking about today, Eric. The internet wrestling community is abuzz after Monday night. We saw the long speculated, maybe the worst kept secret in the business, Michael Cole called it, the debut of Penta for WWE. He's now officially signed to World Wrestling Entertainment and made his debut on the second episode of WWE's Raw on Netflix. With the benefit of hindsight, it was probably a good thing that he got bumped to week 2. He's the biggest story coming out of this episode. You predicted that and said that last week. Did you get a chance to catch Penta's debut, and what did you think of the way they introduced him to a new audience?
I think it's amazing. I saw clips of it. I didn't see it live. I went back and watched it and watched a lot of it on social media throughout the day. Look, I mean, at the risk of sounding like a paid shill, which I'm accused of being, but man, you can't help but to be supportive and just ecstatic about the success that WWE has been having. And it's unfortunate that, so many people think, oh, it's, AEW's, issue. AEW gets, worked into the conversation for some reason, largely because Penta was there for 4 or 5 years and they did nothing with him. And then first night out of the chute, he's off the charts. I saw earlier today that he had like over 1 million hits already on YouTube in a pretty short period of time. So I think they did a phenomenal job. I don't know how it could have been better. What could have been done differently to get just a little bit more out of it? I don't have the capacity to figure that one out. It was awesome.
It was awesome. It felt like a major moment, just the way he was presented. They had new merch for him. They started promoting earlier in the day. He got the pyro, he got the lasers and the lights, and the crying family in the front row. He
got treated like the premiere of a Marvel movie.
Yes, he did.
That's how they marketed him. Like take all the ingredients and elements that go into, promoting a movie prior to the release. Collapse that, but put all of the same things in place. Make it a marketable event before it actually even happens. They treated it just like a movie. It's awesome.
As a reminder, they debuted Rey Mysterio, Vince McMahon did, on a pay-per-view, and Rey Mysterio beat his ass. So things are a little different in WWE. I can't help but wonder, Eric, I know some of that is a bit of a shift because Vince McMahon is no longer there. But part of this still has to be a message within the industry to those who are employed in AEW. I mean, even as the pinfall counts 3, Michael Cole's call says something along the lines of, "Welcome to the big leagues, Penta." Like, this is an opportunity for Triple H and WWE to show off what's possible to all of the AEW locker room, right?
Well, I think that's happening in the normal course of business right now for WWE. I don't think that any extra effort or thought went into Penta because he was coming from AEW. I think they treated him just like they would treat any other major star who was coming into the company. My understanding is that Paul Levesque had his eyes on Penta for quite some time, and I doubt that he was going to do any more or any less with that opportunity to introduce Penta than he did because of AEW. I think it's just normal course of business. It's unfortunate for AEW because it kind of shines a light on what's lacking there. Yeah, but people forget about that in another week. They'll move on to something else.
I thought it was interesting. We saw, if you were going to be critical of anything in the Penta match, there were 2 moments, both of which involved the ropes. And I saw Brian Alvarez say, "Boy, it's going to take him some getting used to." And I kind of forgot until he said that. Oh yeah, almost everyone else in the world uses cable for ropes, sometimes a smaller ring too. But to actually go to ropes, if you're going to be bouncing around and all that, like, I could see how that would be different, right? That's something I don't even think about.
No, I wouldn't have thought about it either. And that's a good observation. My understanding is that Brian Alvarez did some training in the ring.
He's wrestled. Yeah.
Yeah. So he would be speaking from experience in that regard. The other thing is, I wonder how big the AEW ring is. Is it an 18 by 18 or a 20 by 20? I wouldn't expect you to know, but that's something, if anybody's out there listening live over at freeshows.com, baby. Yeah, let us know. But I'd be curious because that's another adjustment. Not that I've ever had to figure it out, but certainly talked to plenty of people who are transitioning from WWE to WCW. And one of the first things they commented on was the difference in the ring. Very favorable, by the way, in WCW. That's the one thing we had over them was an easier ring, according to just about everybody.
Just about everybody. Yeah. From the stories I've heard, the ring was like concrete until Vince McMahon started wrestling himself. And then all of a sudden, hey, we got to do something about these rings. I do want to ask you about Rey Fenix because a pretty well-known person in wrestling, I won't say their name, texted me after the Pentagon debut, and it just said, "I feel bad for Rey Fenix." And I put the ha-ha on it, thinking he was referencing whatever's going on right now with Phoenix and AEW. I don't pretend to know all the details, but certainly looks like, based on the reports we've heard, he's just not going to be used. So he's on the sidelines. But I thought, why is that such a bad thing? But this person is a professional wrestler. And when I was asking, hey, can you expand on what you mean? He was immediate with, they're going to treat Penta like the second coming of Rey Mysterio, the new Rey Mysterio. And there won't be room for a third Rey Mysterio a year from now. Rey's going to miss out on this meteoric rise that Penta's going to enjoy. And then on commentary, I'll be damned. That is exactly what Michael Cole was hammering over and over and over. The second most famous luchador, the second most important luchador, only behind Rey Mysterio. They even interviewed Rey Mysterio after the fact. I wanted to get your take on that. Do you think that, because at first I thought, man, what's the big deal? Rey's getting to sit at home and getting paid, and he'll be fresh and healthy, and he'll be all right. I never considered from a wrestler perspective, hey, man, timing is everything, and he's going to miss the timing here. That didn't even really click for me that Penta is about to be the new Rey Mysterio. What do you think of that?
There's a lot of crackers in that box, Conrad, so let's take them out one at a time and devour them. I'll probably go backwards and have to ask you to repeat a couple of them. You've heard, we've talked about this before, and I think recently within the last couple of shows, I made the comment that, there's two ways to kill somebody off in the wrestling business: overexpose them and underexpose them. And the mistake I think that the average person, a fan, whether you're a hardcore fan or a casual fan, which is probably 95% of the fan base, it would seem like, wait a minute, let's just say he's making $500,000 a year. I don't know what he's making. Doesn't matter. It's a lot. Whatever it is, it's a lot. To the average person, the average fan who's watching, it's a shit ton of money coming in every 2 weeks. And yeah, you could stay home and play video games, cash that check. That would seem to most people like not such a bad deal. But most people don't realize that the longer you're out of the limelight, the more daylight your star sees, meaning nobody sees it because it's daytime. You might as well be in a closet or in a witness protection program. That's not good for your character. Neither is that much time out of the ring, which means you probably, and again, I'm not speaking from a wrestler's perspective. I'm speaking from someone outside of the business that did business with wrestlers and have had these types of conversations before with guys at a very, very high level that knew what the hell they were talking about. So sitting home and doing nothing, even if you prefer not to have a lot of pressure on your time and in your schedule, you realize pretty early on that this is a dead end street because that contract will come up at some point, and they clearly have no value, see no value in you other than getting you off the market and giving you a lot of money. That's not a good thing if you want to survive past that gravy train. And that takes a while to set in, but it does. And you're not developing. You're not getting any better. You're not out there with some of the other best in breed performers that challenge you and help you get better and help you create new things. So sitting home is not such a wonderful thing. What was the other part of your question?
Well, I just wanted to know, do you think that perhaps, in an entertainment world and, well, almost every aspect of business, timing is everything. Is Rey missing his moment? Is Penta going to become...
Oh, no, that's cool.
Rey Mysterio?
That was the best part of your question, and I'm sorry, because that's the fun part. As you were describing that to me, the front part of the last question, I'm thinking, and maybe this is a version of, a podcaster's half glass full, half glass empty. But as you were explaining to me the commentary from Cole, very briefly, I'm thinking, oh, they see him coming, and we're creating some stakes. Right off the bat. Phoenix shows up. What's his issue? He's not the second best wrestler behind, or luchador behind Rey Mysterio. I am. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea, but right off the bat, there's something to work with. So, and that's why I don't, the half glass empty version of this is exactly what you said. Oh boy, I had my shot. Didn't work out for me. Somebody else got it. Might as well take this money from AEW. I guess that's a move. It's a bad one. And I don't think it's going to be necessary. I would be surprised if we don't see Phoenix in WWE. And it may take a while. It's like it took Penta a while. But I think he's going to end up there. And I think he's going to have an opportunity to tell a great story with Penta, whatever that may be. There's a great story to be told with two really, really amazing performers in an ever-growing segment of the overall professional wrestling audience.
Thinking about longevity here for a minute, Eric, I don't pretend to know everything about wrestling, so I'm picking your brain. I want to ask the Hall of Famer. I want to ask the expert.
You're blowing my cover to just blowing the shit right up now.
If they would have come in as a tag team, it feels like most tag teams, especially brother tag teams, have a similar story arc in wrestling. They debut as the new hot tag team. They enjoy some success for a period of time, multiple years usually. Then we start a tease of a breakup. Maybe we actually eventually go through with it. It's brother versus brother. Later they get back together. That's a pretty, but I'm just saying, in a normal circumstance, I do think they would have probably debuted together and as a tag team. In a weird way, the person who benefits the most from Rey Fenix not being released from his AEW contract and having that AEW contract rolled over, the person who will benefit the most is Penta. Isn't that interesting? Because he's going to debut now, not as a tag star. He's right into, as you said, a Marvel type welcome. He's a single star day one.
And he's cutting promos.
Yeah. In Spanish.
And that right there is a part of this whole picture. I mean, so many, I was excited for his family at ringside. That was the part.
God, how could you not be?
Right. And the rest of it, not to diminish the pageantry of it all and how well it was executed and all that, but kind of seen that before, different degrees. But that raw emotion, that real honest to goodness, real emotion that was created live and ended up in my heart and got me excited and brought a tear to my eye is what made that so special. It really is. But here's another maybe perspective on what you just said. I think they both benefit. Number one, I know Phoenix is going to, I don't know. I believe he's going to end up there in WWE, probably in less time than we think. Perhaps. I don't know. But at this point, they're both going to be debuting as single stars. They each individually will have the focus. We'll probably have some, I would imagine, right, when the time comes, however it goes down, there will be advance warning. And you're going to get another version of the Marvel mini movie promotion that we saw with Penta. That'd be my guess. I don't know shit. But God, it just seems so obvious. And if I'm right, and you know how often I'm right? It's a lot.
All the time.
Fucking 97, it's 0.46, whatever. It's a lot. Hardly ever wrong about this stuff when I say I predict. But I predict he's going to be there. I predict he's going to get his big of an arrival party. And I think there's going to be instant story there, and it's going to be a good thing.
I couldn't help but notice when you were saying, Phoenix will be there eventually, maybe sooner rather than later. Well, what's the little laugh about?
I just think because I know here's the laugh. And I'm not going to lie. Subconsciously, I may be trolling everybody just a little bit with my smirks and my little chuckles because I just love fucking with marks.
Oh, God.
I'm not talking about our core audience because this is, as I've said many, 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 many times, we have the most enlightened wrestling audience, I believe, of any wrestling podcast out there. I just believe it. I know it. I get to meet some of them and I talk to them and I become friends with them. So I know how smart our audience is. But what I also know is that outside of our core audience, when little clips of what I say find their way out into the social media platforms, it just stirs up so much crazy shit. And people reveal themselves in so many different ways of being, I don't know, borderline bizarre, and clearly don't know much about the business of the wrestling business. Beyond, they like to watch it, which is cool. Not knocking it. In fact, thank goodness for you people. But man, and I say these things because I know all I got to do is say something a little off, even if I don't do it on purpose. But when I say it, which is what happened there, I go, oh, fuck, I know how they're going to react to that. And it just makes me laugh. It just makes me laugh.
We are indeed live. If you've got a question for Eric, keep them coming. Nonsense McGee says, Eric, AEW rings are the same size as WWE, 20 by 20 per the Google machine.
All righty.
We're also getting some other questions, and I'm sure you've been peppered to death on this. We did react to the Raw debut on Netflix last week, so that's available for free here on YouTube at 83weeks.com. But Mr. Whisper is with us, and he says, Eric, have you had any thoughts about Hulk Hogan's reception at the Raw on Netflix premiere? You know, we talked about it when it was fresh. You were just moments removed from seeing it. You've had a week and change to think on it a little bit. Has your feeling changed at all?
No. And again, it's just another one of those things that people are going to fall down on one or the other side of the fence, depending on what their predetermined perspectives already were. So it doesn't, debating it doesn't really matter. But he's drawing massive crowds everywhere else. He's out promoting his beer, and thousands of people are standing outside in the cold, waiting to get an opportunity to meet him. You saw what kind of reaction. Of course, it was a Republican convention, so that's not even fair comparison. But I think that was a one-off. I'm convinced of it. Anybody that hasn't spent any real time in LA and in a working environment, you don't realize how oppressive the overwhelmingly liberal, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, I'm not taking sides. It just is what it is, folks. And that large segment of LA, their politics has become their religion, and they get really, really invested. So I'm convinced that was it. But I did have a chance to talk to Hulk over the last couple of days, and water off his back, man, and everybody associated with him. So it was a moment. It was an unfortunate moment, but move along.
Well, we're moving along thanks to Tecovas. Anywhere worth going is worth going in good boots. Find your perfect pair with Tecovas. They craft quality Western boots for everyone, from generational ranchers to lifelong cowboys and even first-time boot buyers. Born 10 years ago in Texas, Tecovas truly makes it easy for anyone to find their perfect boot. I hooked my dad up for Christmas. I got him not one but two pair, and I'm so glad I did. He's worn them to the office almost every day. And my dad has never worn cowboy boots his entire life, but man, he found the perfect fit, or actually I did, with Mom's help. The Tecovas website is unbelievably easy, and every one of Tecovas boots are handcrafted with over 200 meticulous steps for broken-in comfort right out of the box. And that's why Esquire loves them and says there's a reason we keep coming back to Tecovas. I'm a big believer in it. I think you will be too. My dad got the gray Chelsea boot, and he also got the ostrich skin. And man, he loves the ostrich skin. It's super comfortable. It's his very favorite pair of shoes now. And if you've ever wondered if you can pull off a pair of boots with your personal style, you owe it to your feet to pull on a pair of Tecovas. Plus, with Tecovas Best in the West guarantee, man, you get free returns and exchanges for 30 days. And right now you can get 10% off at tecovas.com/83 weeks when you sign up for email and text. That's 10% off at tecovas.com/83 weeks. Tecovas.com/83 weeks. See site for details. Tecovas. Point your toes west.
I love those boots. They are awesome. The best pair of boots I've ever put on my feet. And I put on a lot of boots.
I love that. Well, somebody else is maybe looking for some boots that are made for walking. Mr. Corey Graves has got the internet spun up this week. He shared his thoughts Monday night, basically implying on social media that he had his dream of being a professional wrestler taken from him, did his best to be a company man. And I think you recall, Eric, once upon a time, he did commentary for both Raw and SmackDown. So that was the time when he was the voice of the number 1 and the number 2 show in all of professional wrestling. But right now he feels like he's been replaced by someone more famous. Of course, there is the inference there that, he's talking about Pat McAfee. And a lot of people in the wrestling world were convinced, this is a work. I was asked if it was a work, and I don't think it started as one, but man, if Corey really wanted to get back in the ring, controversy creates cash. He may have accidentally, on purpose, maybe created a WrestleMania moment. Wouldn't that be cool? Corey Graves and Pat McAfee at WrestleMania. Sign me up. I'm for that. I actually like that. And I know normally people hate announcer battles, but when they're both athletes, one's a former NFL player who we've seen wrestle before, and one's Corey Graves, who's been a wrestler his whole life. That could be interesting. Do you think we see that, or is this not the best idea for Corey, do you think?
I love this business sometimes.
Isn't it great?
And this is one of those times. This, to me, right now, is one of the most interesting scenarios potentially for WrestleMania. You got the big names, everybody can fantasy book, and it's all fucking awesome. But this, I am so hoping that this is an angle. By the way, did you see Dave's Meltzer's comments about this today?
Yeah, if we see him on TV, it's a work, and if we don't, then
If we
it's
don't,
not.
it's not. That motherfucker studied last night. Oh my God. He must have been up all night reading. But
Well,
go ahead.
to be fair, he did tease when he woke up on Tuesday morning. I think he tweeted something like, I'm going to be at NXT tonight and I've got a lot to say, something like that. And then allegedly, again, we don't know, and I don't even want to know what's real and what's not. Like, I want to be entertained. But we saw reports that they saw him going through Orlando security flying home Tuesday morning before NXT actually started. So he was not on the NXT show after he had promoted it. So it lends even more credit.
That's a little detail. And I don't know how this absolves Dave Meltzer of any stupidity whatsoever. The statement is what it was. If he's on TV, I get it. I get your point. But that's a level. Let's just say it's work. Let's have some fun with this. Act 1, which is Pat McAfee's just doing his thing. They're both just walking down the street, living their own lives, until all of a sudden something happens, an inciting incident, as it's referred to in structural storytelling. Something happens that snatches one of them out of that reality and thrusts them into another. That, in this case, being Corey Graves. And in his emotional state of mind, tosses a hand grenade, kind of, sort of, but not really, over in Pat McAfee's direction. That is such a brilliant setup for the story. If indeed it's a setup, I have no idea. I just want it to be, because if it is, it's freaking awesome. But the level of detail that you just described in order to facilitate the story and help support it, if that happened, if they actually said, okay, let's make sure you make a comment that you're going to be at next, because we know you're not going to be, and let's make sure we get you to the Orlando airport, make sure somebody takes your picture, which they would be doing anyway. I've been in and out of there, having not been on TV for 15 years. I can't get through that airport without people asking me for my picture and my autograph. That's not me putting myself over. That's the honest truth, especially during the busy part of the day. And you can only imagine the amount of attention Corey Graves gets, because number one, he would get a lot of attention if he'd never been in front of a camera. He's a cool looking dude, but with the tats and the look and, you know, the GQ vibe he's got going on, not too many people don't notice Corey Graves, but especially now. My point is, if they went to that extent to create the illusion, then they're really, really on their game. I fear that that's not the case. That's the part that makes me go, oh, maybe it's not.
I actually don't go the other way, man. I'll be honest with you, because you got to remember, it wasn't all that long ago in the scheme of things. We saw Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens get in a fight after a pay-per-view, and it wasn't captured by WWE cameras. It was a parking lot fight, and they just knew fans are going to be out there, and they're going to be looking for pictures and autographs and things like that. And somebody's going to whip their phone out and record it and post it to social, and we can manifest this viral moment. I feel like this regime is going to do more and more of that, especially if last week they opened the show using the words work and shoot and all that. It feels like to me, maybe this didn't start as the plan, but it becomes the plan. But I want to hope that this was a work all along, and we're going to get a really fun what's real and what's not moment at WrestleMania.
And that's the magic of this.
Yes.
Let me say this before. The magic is that sweet spot in the middle. Yeah, I know all the rest of that. Yeah, it's all scripted. Okay, great. It's, you know, it is what it is. This is real, or is it? Is that real? I don't know. Doing just what you and I are doing right now. That's the sweet spot. And That's what sucks people in. And here's what gets me way too excited. If you are right, and I pray that you are as a fan, for all the enjoyment that I know is to come in the future, if they're thinking at that level and thinking about ways to create virality in their storylines that so far hasn't really been done, because it's always obvious. You always know, even if it's done well, you know. But in this case, you and I are not sure. And you're much more of a wrestling fan than I am, and I spent 30 years doing it. So between the two of us and our different perspectives, if we're not sure, neither is anybody else. And if they indeed architected that point or this particular stage of it, that tells me how much fun we're going to have in the future, because it's the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's possible. What you're really doing in a weird way is you're turning back the clock. You're taking what everybody has, and people have asked me for years, Conrad, since you and I have been doing this a lot. You know, do you think you could have pulled off the NWO and Luger and all, you know, in today's environment? Is kayfabe dead because of social media, is what they're asking. I get that question every single time I go to an event. And my answer is always the same. No, somebody just has to figure out how to make it work for them instead of against them. It's kind of Sun Tzu art of war kind of shit, right? But it is what it is. And if, it's a big if, this is hopeful if, half glass full, if they're operating at that level, and this is an example of their work so far, we're going to have so much. The wrestling business is just beginning to grow, because now you're entering a whole different level of storytelling.
I wanted to ask you two more questions, and then we're going to get to our watch along, which, if you haven't already, we want to remind you, join us on Peacock. It's season 5, episode 2 of Nitro, 1 week removed from the finger poke of doom, and we are going to get there. But Eric, I wanted to ask you about, with what we saw with Penta the other night, they were certainly making a big deal out of it on WWE programming, and a lot of his former coworkers from AEW congratulated him on social media. And you brought up social media and, hey, does that kill kayfabe and all that sort of thing? Dave Meltzer pointed out, I think correctly, on Wrestling Observer Radio, that there's almost no chance that if the opposite were to happen here, we would see WWE talent tweeting congratulations to their former coworker debuting with AEW. I thought that was interesting. Why do you think there is a difference there, that the talent feel comfortable congratulating Penta for his WWE debut, at least in AEW, that locker room does, but they quote unquote know better in WWE than to do that?
According to Dave Meltzer.
So you think that's just much ado about nothing?
Well, Bailey probably does, because didn't she show up? It was Bailey and somebody else showed up for.
Bailey has been around to support Sasha Banks. There you go.
So, well, fuck, there goes that narrative.
Okay, well said. Well said. I also wanted to ask you about, I don't know if you've seen this or not, but this really got everybody stirred up at the beginning of the week. We know that we're 1 week away from the return of Saturday night's main event. They're coming to San Antonio, and it's happening next weekend. Eric and I are going to do our best to be live right here on 83weeks.com, and we hope you'll join us, because anytime there's a Saturday night's main event, there's going to be a big story coming out of it. Like an introduction last week to the brand, or last month rather, but now this is going to be the go-home Saturday night's main event for the Royal Rumble. So I expect some storyline advancement maybe that night. But the schedule was released for the rest of the year, Eric. And Saturday night's main event, live on NBC and on Peacock, is going to be head-to-head with AEW's Double or Nothing. It's also going to be head-to-head with AEW All In, their very first stadium show in the suburbs of Dallas and Arlington, Texas, live on NBC for free and on Peacock. This feels so Jim Crockett Promotions WWF, I just can't shake loose of it. What a counter programming note. Dave Meltzer is on record as saying, hey, if Tony doesn't move the pay-per-view to Sunday, he could lose 30,000 pay-per-view buys because of this announcement. And that honestly didn't even cross my mind that, this isn't just we're going to compete, but we're costing buys. He's already announced the 12th He's already sold, I don't know, well over 10,000 tickets. Would you even, if you were Tony, would you consider moving your pay-per-view to Sunday to avoid Saturday night's main event, or is it time to do battle?
Well, first of all, he can't do battle. He's either going to get run over by a truck or he's going to move and be embarrassed. There is no battle. I mean, this just makes me laugh. If Tony Khan knew as much about business as Ted Turner, maybe he wouldn't be in this position. I'm sorry, it was a layup. Yeah, here's what's hard for me to believe. I'm not saying the door is open for me, but this kind of a move, if indeed it was designed intentionally and not just a manifestation of weeks worth of programming and planning and ad sales influences and sports and blah, blah, blah. There's a million things that go into programming a schedule. On the surface, I'm laughing my ass off because, it's a ballsy move, but I don't see them taking it. I don't see them being NBC or WWE putting themselves at any kind of legal exposure for predatory practices, because that's just fun in a way. AEW financially is not a threat to anybody or anything. They're operating in their own universe, and it's fulfilling the owner's goals. And it really doesn't have anything to do, with the exception of some talent transitions from time to time, but there's even less of those now for the moment. But so I can't see NBC or WWE or TKO going, okay, let's kick him. I don't see it. I think it was more than likely, because I think they're risk adverse. They being TKO and NBC, they don't want to end up in court over something like this. It's not worth it. There's no upside to it. I think it's just probably a matter of weeks and months worth of scheduling and planning and going, okay, we need one this quarter. Where's the best place for it? And, oh, by the way, look what else is going on. That's my guess is that's what happened. I don't think it was an intentional Crockett type move, as you pointed out. I don't think it was malicious. Feels that way, looks that way, but I think it's too risky to do that.
Well, something that's not risky is you're going to have more fun with Prize Picks this NFL playoffs. I am so pumped that the playoffs are here. This weekend is going to be filled with good games. Saturday, we've got a couple of big ones. It's the Texans and the Chiefs, and we've also got the Commanders and the Lions. And then on Sunday, we got the Rams and the Eagles, and then the Ravens and the Bills. And Prize Picks has made this NFL season so much fun for me. And right now, there's over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. And that's all because Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. It's the best place to get real money sports action, and it's so easy. You just pick more or less on 2 players for a shot up to 200x your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. They're America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, and I really enjoy it because it's so easy. Like, take a look at this Chiefs game. It's this simple. Do you think that Mahomes is going to have more or less than 250 yards, for example? Do you think Travis Kelce is going to get more or less than 1 touchdown? There's another example. And boom, you place those 2, you're in play. That's it. That's all you got to do to have fun with Prize Picks. And more importantly than that, you're going to win a bunch of cash. I've had a lot of fun with this, and I don't have a pro team. I'm a big college football guy. So the idea that I got to do this on Sundays made the games that much more fun. Download the app today. Use our code 83weeks, and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's worth repeating. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use our code 83weeks. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
You know what's fun about Prize Picks?
What's that?
I've never, ever bet on sports. I mean, I think I bet on a Tyson Holyfield fight once, won a shit ton of money too. But it's just not my thing. And I'm a real passive football fan. I like football and I like to watch it occasionally during the season, but very invested during the playoffs. But one of the things I've learned to love to do is I drive around on Sundays. I put my dog in my truck. I go to the Infinity Sports app and listen to their coverage of the NFL on game day. It is phenomenal. The way they cover every game that's going on. They're on for like 8 hours throughout the entire day. The way they cover every game is absolutely phenomenal. It's entertaining as hell. I have much more fun doing that than I do watching on television. Now, enter Prize Picks. I'm getting so much information, and so much of that show is built around the odds, right? And the lines. And that's like the premise of just about every conversation. It always comes back to that. So you're constantly getting updated on, kind of inside information you think can make you pretty smart about shit you don't know much about. And you listen to it long enough and you start getting a feel for things. And I've made a couple bets and I've won. I think I'm 3 out of 5 right now. And I don't bet a lot of money. I'm doing it more for entertainment. But I'm finding myself learning more about the game and become a bigger fan of the game because of this opportunity. And I maybe I'm weird that way, but it is really interesting how much this opportunity has intersected with entertainment and how well it's working.
What it is fun. Go download the Prize Picks app, use our code 83 weeks, place your first $5 lineup, and here comes $50 instantly. Eric, there's a lot more I want to talk to you about, and the questions are starting to come in, but without further ado, we need to get going on our watch along. Watch along with us on Peacock. It's season 5, episode 2. Eric, make sure you're muted. I'm at all 000. Are you locked and loaded, ready to go?
I am ready, Captain.
Here we go. In 3, 2, 1, play. So this is from January 11th, 1999. We're seeing what happened the week prior. Of course, we know this is the finger poke of doom era. I don't know that you've seen it, but our buddy Guy Evans, he's been busy as a beaver lately. He's hooked up with David Penzer and did Sitting Ringside Part 2, which I just got a copy of, and I can't wait to dig in. And now he's got another book, Beyond Nitro, where he actually sat down with the creator of the NWO logo, which we've talked about here on the show before. Man, is there a higher recommendation we can give for all things WCW than Guy Evans as a resource?
I mean, I read that part of the story when I think her name was Jenny Sloan, perhaps. Maybe got the name wrong. Apologize, Jenny, if I did. But what a fascinating story. I mean, he took something that, in the big scheme of things, not too many people think about the logo, right? There's so much other stuff that took place over that 3 or 4 year period of time. But that story about how it was developed, the situation, how it all came to be, Jennifer, I think is her name, Jenny Sloan, if I got the name right, her story, just coming to work for Disney and, kind of on the cutting edge, a lot of the technology that was available to Disney at that time. It was really a fascinating story, and it just adds another layer to that whole era. It's really great.
Jenny Sloan and her entire interview, or at least a good portion of it from Guy Evans' new book, Beyond Nitro, is available now. Go check it out at guyevansbooks.com. Eric and I are big believers in Guy and his work. He helped Eric with his second book. He's done now 2 books with Dave Penzer. We loved the Nitro book, and now Beyond Nitro is a follow-up effort. He's sort of become one of the more preeminent wrestling authors in the space, don't you think?
Well, and he was also really, I believe, I didn't hear this directly from Dwayne Johnson, Rock, or Brian Gewirtz. But I guess I did hear this a little bit from Brian. Their reason for doing Who Killed WCW was largely because of Guy Evans' book.
Wow.
Because of the new information, the relevant interviews that Guy did. He did over, I think it was 114 interviews with executives who were involved and not just, on the outside looking in. So it was one of the reasons that whole Who Killed WCW production happened. And I think that production pretty much ended just about any open-ended issues or questions about what really happened. So I'll always be grateful to Guy.
Ric Flair is back here. He is opening up Nitro as we are live here on January 11th in Knoxville, Tennessee, in front of 13,024 fans. 12,280 of them were paying fans who paid a big total for a live TV show, $261,285. It is a huge arena, though. This is a 26,000 seater. Wait, is that right? That can't be right. But that was written in the Observer back then. Show opened with a Flair interview. He put J.J. Dillon back in power. He said Hogan would defend the title at Super Brawl. He called out the LWO and put them over as the most talented wrestlers in the company and asked them to join WCW and give him their shirts. They all do, except Rey Mysterio Jr., who walked out. He challenged Hennig to a match on the show. It was a great interview, but the one thing nobody in WCW has figured out is when they use the word tradition to modern fans, it's a total heel word, meaning old timers, and they think it's some babyface phrase. What do you think of that? That maybe this generation of wrestlers, the Ric Flairs of the world, when they talk about tradition, they think it's something to be celebrated, but the fans of the NWO who like maybe the cooler, edgier heels, they think tradition sucks. They think it's outdated. Have you ever given any thought to that? I think that's an interesting perspective that he has there.
I'm not 100% sure I follow it, but if what I'm hearing is that there is a percentage of the fan base that were LWO fans who really don't give a shit about tradition and the values that
not LWO, Eric. I'm saying NWO. I know we were talking about the LWO, but
okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Here in this era, tradition is not a good term. It's a heel term. Like the fans don't want tradition, Eric. They want you, Eric. They don't like tradition.
I don't think that was necessarily. I think it's partially true, I guess. But keep in mind, NWO was getting over. They became cool heels. So they had their support. Anybody that comes out and tries to position themselves as having an opposite perspective is going to get a heel reaction from that particular part of the audience. We wanted intentionally to split the audience. We wanted WCW and the fans of traditional wrestling and the fans of the Ric Flairs and the Roddy Pipers and that era and the styles, even though Bret Hart, for example, wasn't, older than Rick or even part of Rick's peer group. I believe Bret was a little bit younger than Rick. But they represented that style, that tradition, which was the antithesis, if you will, of what the NWO was all about, which is essentially anarchy. They want to take over the joint.
J.J. Dillon back on screen here. He's going to be the commissioner for WCW. What did you think? I mean, we've talked a little bit about his role in that, or his performance in that role. What did you think of Ric Flair, the commissioner? I mean, it really didn't make all that much sense, but I mean, it was an excuse to get him on TV and get him some mic time. So I guess everybody was on board with it. What did you think?
To be honest, I think it diminishes someone like Rick in that. Diminish might not be the right word. It takes the edge off of him. You do get to see another side of that character because now that character is involved in discussions and story and parts of a story that are different than what we normally see them in. We get to hear a different perspective when they're cutting promos, perhaps like we're seeing now with Rick. So you get another glimpse at the character, but I think it takes the edge off him. You're no longer dangerous when you're in a suit and tie. Not the same kind of dangerous. So I generally don't like it. Doesn't work for me. But it's been done a bunch of times, so it's a tool.
Let's do some questions here. Carl Hayes is with us here live. Appreciate you hanging out with us, Carl, as we watch this old episode of Nitro from January 11th, 1999, just 1 week after the Finger Poke of Doom. Carl says, do you think TNA signs a mainstream or more distributed station and gets more eyes? The TNA Women's Champ was on NXT Scouting last night. The two brands have had lots of crossover. Eric?
It's possible, right? It's possible that TNA and WWE are going to do some kind of joint venture, and maybe because, wrestling's working on CW and they could probably use more content. So maybe vis-a-vis the relationship and a little bit of strategy and deal making, maybe you will see TNA on CW. Or not.
I'd put that around near zero. Let's play if we can. Let's
right.
throw
And you may be right, but why?
Buddy, I can't believe anybody believes any of this bullshit. WWE has TNA on their programming all the time so they can fuck up every other promotion in the world and counter program the shit out of them. They just had to award $20 million to MLW 13 months ago because they were trying to push the narrative that WWE's trying to not play fair and try to create a monopoly. And well, how can we have a monopoly if we're promoting other brands on our very own show? Now, it's not the A show and it's not the B show. It's the C show, but by God, look, there's TNA right there. So what do you mean we accidentally on purpose scheduled head to head with the biggest AEW pay-per-views on free TV? Not us. We're a friend to everyone in wrestling. Look what we're doing for TNA over here. Did you watch on our C show on the CW? Man, fuck off. They ain't gonna do nothing with TNA for real. That's there to just CYA.
I don't disagree with you, but because I see it a little differently than you do, but essentially we talked about this before. We talked about one of the reasons why we're seeing TNA people on WWE and vice versa. And we pointed out that very point, which is why I think expanding it and assisting TNA to find a home on CW is an extension of that same strategy. It is a more credible extension. It takes that goodwill to the next level and makes it even harder for someone to go, hey, yeah, but look at you mean guys. What do you mean? We've taken this company over here that couldn't get television outside of wherever they are, and we're facilitating an opportunity for them independently of us to have a television show. And oh, by the way, the talent can cross over back and forth, which helps both of them. It's not that absurd of an idea. It's taking it a little further than you would.
Come on, Eric.
But look, I'm not saying it's happening. I'm saying it's possible because it is an extension of the same logic.
Here's the most absurd shit Eric Bischoff has ever said on anything.
That's colors of ground, brother.
I believe it. I believe it though, because here's what you just said differently. Conrad, I think Nick Khan would be in a great humanitarian that he is. He would probably go negotiate on TNA's behalf and negotiate a new huge television rights deal where half benefits his company and his shareholders and half go to this Canadian company. What? There's no chance that Nick Khan is going to go out and negotiate a TV deal for TNA. There's no chance.
I didn't suggest he would.
Well, you're saying that there's going to be talent going back and forth and maybe they can get a deal because of no way. You even referenced CW. NXT's on CW. Nick Khan's not going to invite TNA to CW or help get them on CW. No way.
All right.
No chance. By the way, I'm a fan of everything WWE's doing. I'm just saying we're not going to go even when WWE was helping ECW, they didn't get them a TV deal. They sent them $150,000 a week and acted like, oh, we did you guys a favor.
They had never been sued and lost $20 million either.
That's exactly right. Which is why I think they're going to continue to placate TNA. And by the way, if TNA decides that they don't like this deal anymore and they want to take their ball and go home, and they won't, but if they did decide they want to do that, they just do it with somebody else. They do it with New Japan or somebody else. And why wouldn't you? Doesn't change anything.
I would.
Oh, you did many times. Of course, we're watching a promo here all about tradition, and we're seeing the heritage throughout the years of WCW, which is kind of fun because you're seeing the evolution from the old NWA to now what happened last week. Interspliced in here with Ric Flair and Terry Funk and Ole and Arn Anderson is the finger poke of doom and the modern era. Man, it really does cover a lot of ground when you talk about how much not just the company changed or the industry changed, but just society, the world, even bigger than America. I mean, look at Jack Briscoe. Like this is what wrestling used to be. And at that point, the world didn't even look like that anymore. It's interesting to go back and look at these clips like this and think about just how deep the history of WCW / the NWA really was, right?
And wrestling in general. It's been such an important part of our culture, obviously bigger now or more visible in so many different ways, but it's a uniquely American product. And when you read about the history of it, the fact that Abraham Lincoln used to be a professional wrestler at one point. I mean, the history of professional wrestling in the United States is a fascinating history. And seeing a slice of it as we did here, it always catches my eye. I'll always stop what I'm doing to watch it when I see it.
We're finally seeing the announcers at the desk. You see Larry Zbyszko taking his bow. The Professor Mike Tenay is doing his thing. And man, the connective tissue between WCW and AEW is bigger than just TBS and TNT. It's that man right front and center. Tony Schiavone in the internet wrestling community last week, Eric, decided that Tony wasn't at AEW Dynamite because he got suspended because he sent a shitty tweet to the guy from New Japan who said some less than favorable things about Tony Khan, and then he deleted it. Little did they know that, which they would have had they listened to Tony's podcast, his lovely wife Lois had a hip replacement. So he had to be home with his wife who, needed help walking with her new hip. Isn't it interesting how sometimes the truth is just not nearly interesting enough?
Oh.
The rumor
which goes on to explain about 90% of this bullshit you hear during shoot interviews from everybody, including me, by the way, because you got to make that story a little bit more interesting to listen to. And then before you know it, after you've told that story a couple hundred times, people that hear it go, wait a minute, I was there. What the fuck are you talking about? It happens.
Tony Schiavone is on the call tonight. You and I are about an hour away from Dynamite starting tonight. And as everyone's listening to this, they already know what happened. But one of the matches that's been promoted tonight is Powerhouse Hobbs going for an AEW world title shot against Jon Moxley. And there's been a little bit of a movement in the internet wrestling community who says, hey, we need that. I guess fans were upset at Tony Khan's announcement last weekend that there was going to be a 12-man tag on Collision. The Death Riders, this group, Eric, that was supposed to be this group of outsiders who were here to take over, they took the world title, and maybe they're trying to take over the promotion. Maybe that sounds familiar as we watch clips of the NWO here from 1999. And now they're teaming with Chris Jericho's group. So wait a minute. I thought you were taking over the whole thing, but now you're just teaming with AEW heels. And I guess some hardcore AEW fans were pretty upset about the lack of continuity and storylines there. And there's been a little bit of a movement from people who say, now's the time to take the belt off Moxley. Now's the time to make Powerhouse Hobbs. I know there's been a big contingent. I know JR has been a big proponent of Powerhouse Hobbs, and he's back after a long injury, a big absence, and he is back and bigger and more jacked than ever before. If you were going to make a move like this and push a guy, this would be the right time. I mean, we've reintroduced him. If you're getting a little bit of pushback on your creative, Eric, is now the time to pull the lever? It feels like you did this once before with Lex Luger and Hulk Hogan. Could this be Powerhouse Hobbs night? Would you even consider it right now, Eric?
Right now, I would consider anything if I was Tony Khan, because it just, all you need to do is, find some comments about Death Riders, find anything on social media, go to Twitter, X, whatever, and just look at any of the threads. The audience has made up their mind. They're done with it. And it's overwhelming. It's not close. Most of the time, it's, the issues like this are always 50-50, 60-40 sometimes. This is like 95-5. It's dead. It's not working. Why not? What have you got to lose? There's nothing but potential upside, because this story isn't working. It's easy to figure that out. You're a data analyst or whatever you are, head of math at the Jaguars. Look at your own math. and come to a conclusion. It's pretty simple. It's not working. So now you've got an opportunity. People are excited about it. They're anticipating it. They want it for him. So now the flame has been lit. All you've got to do is add a little fuel to it and give the guy a push. And it's not like you have to do a risk analysis. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain, which is why they won't do it.
They're actually in Cincinnati tonight. They're set up for 15.
By the way, I hope I look like an asshole for saying that, and they prove me wrong, and it works, and it's hugely successful. I hope I'm wrong.
Hey, I'm a fan of Powerhouse Hobbs, and I know that Tony likes to monitor Twitter. So if you're in our live feed, don't go spamming Tony. Don't do it saying we want Powerhouse because Eric said you wouldn't do it. You better not do it, Tony. Don't do it. What I find is interesting is they are running smaller buildings, Eric, and you've been a big proponent of this. And I really enjoyed the run of shows they had at the Hammerstein. It was a smaller, more intimate venue, but it felt like the crowd was really with it. I liked the visual. Even my wife commented how cool it looked. Tonight, I haven't seen it yet, but they're at a music center in Cincinnati, Ohio. So it's not like a round where it's an arena where a basketball team plays or a hockey plays or something like that. There's a stage, and you're playing almost to like a giant theater. I think it seats around 8,000 for a traditional concert or something like that. They've got it set up for around 1,500 in Cincinnati. And I did a double take when I saw that, Eric, because again, I'm from Alabama. What the hell do I know? But Cincinnati feels like a pretty big market. Only 1,500 tickets. I think I might be looking for some sort of stunt today to get people excited that, hey, anything really can happen on Dynamite.
Opportune time. Like I said, they've got nothing to lose. You know, Cincinnati is a great wrestling market. It has historically been a really good wrestling market, even though it has been saturated over the decades with a lot of good wrestling. So it's not like it's a market that's kind of here nor there as far as wrestling fans are concerned. It's a solid market, and to only draw 1,500 people, to go back to my data analyst conversation, I'd analyze that data and ask myself a serious question. The people around me that I trust, what do we got to lose? Absolutely nothing. And what a shock it would be. And it would also, Tony would also kind of reestablish a little bit with himself with the audience by giving them a little bit of hope that maybe he's not going to just stick with this thing until he rides it into the ground. It never got off to a good start to begin with. It's never done well. It's not like it was working and then it's not. It started out bad and got worse. Make a move.
We just watched some fun interactions there with Chris Jericho. I do want to talk about that, but very quickly, I found that Cincinnati is the 36th largest DMA here in America. So not the biggest, not the smallest, but 36, pretty good sized crowd. Pretty good sized kid running to the ring here too. That's Sonny Ono trailing the Cat. I recently sat down with Ernest Miller for adfreeshows.com. And man, we got more detail about his career than I ever have before. We even spent a lot of time talking about the movie The Wrestler. I was so inspired to actually go watch that afterwards, after we finished that conversation. But we really started off talking about his transition from the world of karate to the world of pro wrestling after meeting you, Eric. Let's take a listen.
Back in 2 months, he said, come to my office. Then he said, what took you so long? Why did it take you so long to even, take advantage of this? He said, I told you I can make you a weapon, man. I told you this can make you money. This can make you famous. And I said, you know what, Eric? I got about 24 young brown belts who are about to become a black belt. If I had just jumped and left them, they probably would never been right, as a black belt, because I'm the one that train them and teach them. They want their black belt from me. So if I left the school, I couldn't present them with their black belt. Your son being one of them. So bang, soon the graduation day, they graduated and got their black belt. The next week I was in school. I remember going to class every day. Boom, boom, boom. 3-4 days a week, we had class. Then one day, about maybe a month into school, Eric came in And I think he came in with NWO. They were practicing something. And Eric came down. Then Eric looked at me. He was like, Ernest, what are you doing here? I said, Eric, I told you I was going to start as soon as we finish the class. He said, I know, but he said, have you got paid yet? And I was like, no. He was like, what? He said, we are supposed to pay you to be down here. You see, so I was getting paid to be in.
You just showed up at the power plant. You weren't, he didn't direct you there. You just showed up.
No, I just showed up, and it was a good thing I did because everybody in there knew me for me. They didn't know me as Eric Bischoff guy.
Yeah.
They just knew for me. They knew my hard work. They knew everything, you know, and they just let me in. They didn't ask me to sign anything. I went down there and said, Eric told me to come down here. They signed me up, boom, put me right in the class.
Man, how fun is that? Catch the entire conversation we had with Ernest the Cat Miller and all of our other episodes of False Finish over at adfreeshows.com. We've caught up with everybody. Glacier, Wrath, even Tex Slazenger. I mean, lots of other fun ones too, man. It's a who's who, really, of, hey, whatever happened to that guy? Well, it's all available at adfreeshows.com. That's where you'll find other exclusive series you can't hear anywhere else with Tully Blanchard, Mike Chiodo, David Crockett, Lex Luger, The Godfather, and so much more. Go check it out right now. Become a big part of what we're doing at adfreeshows.com. So Ernest the Cat Miller here, really taking it to Perry Saturn, but we just saw a fun little segment with Chris Jericho. Jericho was wearing his Monday Night Jericho shirt. He had the crazy hair going. He had Ralphus with him. This is my favorite version of Chris Jericho. I enjoyed his work I saw on VHSs before when I was a tape trader over in Japan, but he never really did much for me as like just the white meat babyface Chris Jericho in WCW. But when he became the conniption having, David Pinzer jacket ripping, Ralphus accompanying, top knot sporting Chris Jericho, that was fun. What were you thinking of?
One holes.
Yes. What do you think of that evolution of Chris Jericho? We finally got to see his real personality come out.
He's such an amazing talent, you know, and everything, all that stuff was him. It's not like we all sat in a room and said, hey, let's do this with Chris, or let's do that with Chris. You know, nobody was coming up with this stuff but Chris. And he was so good at it. It's like I couldn't wait to get to the TV to see what he was going to come up with next. You know, amazing. And he just got better and better and better and better at it. And, you know, how many times has he reinvented his character? It's fascinating. Fascinating. I think he's doing it right now. I think we're going to be seeing some interesting Chris Jericho in the future. And I know everybody's going to go nuts over that, but half glass full, people, half glass full.
Did you catch his match last week with Dax from FTR?
Yep.
What'd you think?
I think we're going to see an evolution of Chris Jericho. I don't know when. I think we're in the midst of an evolution. Let's put it that way. And I don't talk to Chris. I'm not hinting at anything. I'm not trying to be cute. I'm just telling you what I think in my heart. I've known the guy for 25 years. I know a little bit about how he thinks. Just a little bit. Not a lot. We're not good buddies. Never were. We're friendly. That's what we are. We're friendly. We touch base maybe once a year on a text. But I just have a feeling.
Michael Borland is with us here live, and he says, Eric, sad to see Jericho's in-ring work now in AEW. Wanted to ask you about his time in WCW. He left for WWE and was put against top guys. Looking back, were there booking decisions you would have done over to give him a push? So if you had it to do over again, because this is what we're seeing right here, this feud he's starting with Perry Saturn is going to ultimately be the one where there's a dress involved and the loser has to wear a dress. And lots of people assumed, well, he's going to get this as punishment because he's not re-signing his new contract and he's going to be putting in notice and leaving. In fact, it went to Perry Saturn instead. But I know that he was frustrated that he had worked himself, he felt like, into a good spot with Goldberg, and it just felt like that match was never going to happen. we know, things probably worked out the way it was supposed to, but if you had a do-over, would you have done anything differently with Chris Jericho in WCW?
Not as far as he and Bill Goldberg was concerned, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't know how far we can take this hypothetical, but if I could go back in time and decide to go Jericho Goldberg in hopes of keeping him, would I have done that even knowing what I know today? Probably not, because that match would have been a disaster. You couldn't, and I know Chris will take exception to that. He might be pissed off at me for saying that, because Chris would believe, especially at that time, that he would be capable of having a match with anybody, especially Bill, because he wanted it. But Bill was not ready for that match. And there's nothing that Jericho could have done in the ring to get him comfortable. Could he have gotten in his head and then work it out? Maybe, but I don't think so. Bill was not ready emotionally to do anything other than what he was. When I say emotion, I mean his head wasn't enough in his character, and he didn't have enough repertoire. My point, he was great at what he did. But if you had to, now we're going to start talking about 20, 30-minute matches, far more complex matches than Bill had ever had at that point. He just wasn't ready. So no, I wouldn't have done it differently, because I think the outcome would have been worse, to be honest, as much as I didn't want to lose Jericho. And I tried hard to keep him. And we had a good relationship when he left. So people want to read into that and, punishment for not re-up and all that just internet dipshit, basement dwelling, dirt sheet bullshit. It wasn't true. I tried to keep him. I was willing to pay to keep him, but Chris rightfully saw himself at a higher level than he knew he was going to be able to climb within a reasonable amount of time, short period of time. He knew for the next 6 months or a year, he was in the position he was in, and there was not likely an opportunity to break out of it. He wasn't going to be patient. Chris himself had said that he intentionally came to WCW as a stepping stone to get to WWE. It was a strategy that he had contemplated and worked towards before he ever got to WCW. So it was just the right time for Chris, and there's nothing I could have done or should have done actually to try to change that.
Whose car did
my wife sold Jag?
That's what I was going to ask, because I saw it was blocked in and you acknowledged it, so I knew it was someone's car.
Yeah,
So catch everybody up. The building you pulled up here, is this the WCW office? Are you out of the red tower at this point, or the big tower?
Yeah, we're out of the CNN tower. This was the log cabin, as they call it. It was on Log Cabin Drive, so they referred to it as the log cabin office. But yeah.
Did you have to scan your key like that every day, or was that just part of the show?
No, that was for show. Well, I mean, I had to scan my key, but I intentionally put it in backwards so it didn't work.
Right. I just didn't know, because sometimes I know that people don't act. They may have the technology, but they don't use those.
No, I think we used it. I mean, I know we did in some cases, but
wait, just so I'm clear, this is the lobby of the WCW office in 1990?
Yes, it is. My offices were right down that hallway where the door was closed. I don't know who she is.
Who's the fellow there? Do you know who that is?
I do not.
It's written in the newsletters at the time that this video is way too long, but it is noteworthy because it is the first appearance of the legendary Janie Engel. And yeah, this is kind of interesting because we've never really watched this together. I don't even remember watching it back then. I'm sure I did, but the finger poke of doom. I mean, this was probably, because this is hour 2. So at this point, Raw was on. The first hour was unopposed. But I assume when I saw this was a vignette, I'm probably watching whatever's happening on the other show. How did you feel about Crash TV? This is the same calendar year where we know Vince Russo is going to come on, and Crash TV became, sort of a thing he was known for. What do you think of that with the benefit of hindsight? Do you think at times Nitro needed more of that, or was that just a strategy that worked because of the craziness they could
I don't even know what Crash TV means. So it's Crash TV coming out of Russo's mouth always meant to me no fucking plan, no story, just crazy shit. Just shock. He was like a Howard Stern of professional wrestling. There was no real creativity in it. It's just shock for the sake of shock, and then call it Crash TV.
Well, I've always thought Crash TV just meant it was fast. So an example might be just last week with Jeff Jarrett, we watched, oh, look, Janie Engel, there she is. And she was in real life your right-hand man, right? A right-hand woman.
She was indeed one of the most important people outside of my wife and children in my life at the time. And that, by the way, is my office. Wow, this is weird.
Okay, so I guess I'm just a couple of seconds behind you. Or no, you were watching where Silva is. I'm at 32, 47, 48, 49, 50. So maybe just a couple of seconds behind you. But I'm excited to see what would have been your office. Now, will this be the same office where you allegedly put on a Viking helmet and took out your front teeth, daring to fight talent?
You asshole.
Is this the same office or is that the one in the tower?
No, it's actually this office.
Is this the same office where you threw coffee at Eddie Guerrero or is that a different one?
No, I think it was in San Antonio or that was in
a building. Look at that old monitor.
Look at, oh, that's my desk. Wow, how about that? I haven't seen that in that picture up on the wall behind me. Yeah, that's a famous portrait. So yeah, this is actually my office.
I love Flair with his big purple robe in the background, acting like this is his office.
This was really a fun. I mean, I did. It might have gone. See that NWO for Life little black plate on the round table?
Yes.
My daughter made me that, and I still have it.
Oh wow, how cool is that?
Yeah. As much of the relationship had been pretty strained between Rick and I, but once it was over, I mean, you know Rick better than I do at this point.
It was over.
Once you get past it, it was so much fun. We just had a blast working together. Look at that computer. High-tech shit right there, brother.
Buddy. Just think that's the contract where you would, see what the message boards were saying about you. You jump on CompuServe and see what Bob Ryder and One Wrestling were saying about you. Man, what a different era.
I would just go down the hall and say, Bob, what are you saying about me?
Was he here by 99 or was that later? He may have been here by then.
I think he was here. Bob was with us for a long time.
Here's what's crazy. I was talking about Crash TV a minute ago, and I wanted to follow up on that because I just watched an episode where Jeff Jarrett booked him against 3 legends. And the last one was Jimmy Snuka. And he came off the top of the cage and did the Superfly splash onto Jeff. And it gave Jeff the worst injury of his entire career, and it wasn't close. It was a terrible concussion. And he got it from Superfly, giving him the splash off the cage. But what was interesting is it was like 1, 2, 3. Oh, my God, Jeff Jarrett lost. Cut to the backstage area. So we don't see him. And that's not edited off the network because they didn't want you to see Jeff hurting. That wasn't it. It was just the Vince Russo. We went straight from the in-ring action. Okay, that match is over. Let's show Kevin Nash walking down the hall, taping up his wrist, headed to the ring. Like that to me is the definition of Crash TV. We don't let anything breathe. We're just on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing.
Yeah, there's no transitions. There's no continuity. It's just throw that shit up against the wall and see what sticks. Right?
Yeah, no, I can't disagree. Anyway, this segment here, when I'm saying, hey, I probably never even saw this because I switched over to Raw, I may have been the only one because this segment did a 6.4 rating. So I know there's a whole lot of people who consume wrestling and think the most important thing in wrestling is, wrestling. But this segment we're watching right now, 2 middle-aged men talking about their differences, one in a suit and one in a black leather jacket and shit in a box, got a 6.4 rating at a nondescript office building.
That's about 8 million viewers, people. Just so I don't know, 7.5, 8 million viewers.
The point is, we care about story first. There's a lot of good fights in The Sopranos. I can't describe many of them, but I remember the characters and I remember their stories. But the violence was almost a backdrop. And I think Chris Jericho once described The Walking Dead as a drama with vampires as a backdrop. And WWE is probably a drama with wrestling as a backdrop. What do you think of that? You agree?
Yes, I do. Yes. Wrestling is no different than a drama or an action movie, except for it relies on physical narrative as opposed to the spoken word. But the elements and the emotion in the story structure, the methodology of telling stories and developing characters is exactly the same. It's modified, but the elements are the same, exactly the same. It's just a different, as you said, backdrop.
Who's the who's the fella driving the truck there? Could you tell? Because that was not Klondike, I don't believe.
No, he's got too nice a smile. Is that it? Oh, come on, give me a look. No, we're not going to get it. I don't know who that was. Probably somebody working back in the warehouse.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the questions that we got coming in here. Ask a Bum says, will the hip toss / arm drag ever make a comeback? That's something I hadn't even noticed. I guess there's not a lot of hip tosses and arm drags, maybe not as many as there used to be, but maybe I haven't been paying much attention. Do you think there's an absence of those moves right now?
I'm not paying close enough attention to be able to determine the lack of any particular move set. But arm drag it's a nice transition spot, I guess. It's dynamic and done well. When you get somebody that's really, really good at an arm drag, it's really believable and it's fairly dynamic. You're taking somebody from one side of the ring and tossing them to the other in a believable looking manner. So I hope it makes a comeback if indeed it went away.
Something I hope makes a comeback is hobby horses. We're watching live here as Chavo Guerrero is at the bottom of the ramp on Nitro being interviewed by Mean Gene. And here's Pepe, his mop handle horse. Listen, I know that every now and again we have to prove to ourselves that we can get silly shit over. Jericho and Moxley tried to do this with a potted plant once before. Hobby horse, though. And here he's wearing a neck brace. Man, high five to Chavo for just going all in on this. A lot of people would have thrown the flag on this, but he's at least trying to have fun with it. And
it was his idea.
It's funny too. What do you think? Does wrestling need more of this? Because there is a narrative out there, and I think even Jim Ross would echo this. Funny, don't draw money. I don't know if I agree with that, but Jim Ross does. Where do you land on funny and money?
I think it's a great element. I think when you've got a 2-hour show, or in some cases a 3-hour show, it can't all be the same type of emotion. I think you've got to take people on a little bit of a entertainment roller coaster ride. And I think there's plenty of room in a 2-hour show for the things that are tongue-in-cheek, funny, borderline hilarious, or just ridiculous. Wrestling is not to be taken so seriously that you can't have some comedic elements in it. It works, Dusty Rhodes. It's a buffet. It is. You need to have some variety on your buffet. Not everybody wants prime rib. It is what it is.
Hypothetically, do you think maybe Dusty had a little bit of the wacky tobacco when he came up with Pepe?
It wasn't Dusty. It was
Eric, I'm trying to make a goddamn transition to Vea. Can you just play along or pretend like you're
I think Dusty was high as fuck.
What did it look like? Show me what it looked like when Dusty was reaching.
When he was reaching.
All right, listen. Here's a tryout for next week, Eric.
Oh, why did you mean reaching for what? I'm
puff gas.
Conrad, I'm an old man. Leave me alone. I'm older than your dad, for crying out loud. You're picking on me for not being hip. I don't know.
Baby, what if?
Listen, here we go. Here we go. We'll make up for it. I'm not going to wait till next week.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Oh, baby. Wrestling is a buffet, if you will. Got to have a little bit of this. Something for everyone. Baby. How's that?
I mean, what if, baby, we had Chavo come down on a horse? Well, Dusty, we can't get a horse into the building, PETA and the athletic commission and the building manager. Baby, it ain't got to be a live horse. It could be one of them that my little rascal Cody is running around with, a stick horse, a hobby horse. We could name his ass Pepe. Maybe he came up with this after a little Vea. Maybe you're looking to be creative in 2025. Maybe you need a new hobby horse. 2025, a new year, a new you, full of new possibilities. Well, this year reach new heights with Vea. Trusted by 1 million happy customers. And I mean it. Vea is the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products. By the way, Vea has something for you no matter what you're looking for. They've got products that range from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC. They're world-renowned at Vea for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes. They've got THCA flower. They've got soothing topicals. They've got calming drops. And the best part is Vea legally ships to nearly all the states in the United States. It's going to show up to you in discreet packaging directly to your door, all with a worry-free guarantee and no medical card needed. So if you're 21 or over, be sure to check out the link to Vea's website in our description. Be sure to use our code 83weeks. You'll get 15% off. And if you're new to Vea, you even get a free gift of your choice. I've been a big believer in this. I have to admit, I was a novice, but Vea hooked me up and we got to vet the product. And man, they sent me a care package. And what I love most about it is it's labeled. If you're looking for something to make relations feel more relatable, they got that. If you need help focusing, you need help sleep, you need more energy, maybe you're just in pain, they've got something for everybody with Vea. And by the way, the products range from 0 milligrams to 100 milligrams of THC. So they got you covered no matter where you are in your journey. Vea is the only lifestyle hemp brand. So if you're looking for better sleep, to ease your anxiety, to enhance your mood, or maybe to just get high and come up with hobby horse wrestling angles, they've got something for you. It's made right here in the USA. Great award-winning customer service. Go right now. If you're 21 or over, check out the link to Vea in our description and use the code 83weeks. Man, you get 15% off. And if you're new to Vea, you get a free gift of your choice. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. This year, enhance your everyday with Vea. Hey, this is one of my favorite storylines that seemingly went nowhere, Eric. You and I have not spent a ton of time talking about this. The Raven character is not one you identified with. You didn't like it. You've talked about it a lot here on 83 Weeks. But now we're getting some context, because if we know anything here at 83 Weeks, it's that context is king. And your backstory that you're putting forth for Raven is that he's not this grungy street kid. He's actually from a wealthy family. And he's just showing his ass on WCW programming. So we're showing him right now talking to his mom at his family mansion. And he's got, well, that is the Sandman from ECW wearing a polo and glasses as his rich friend or family member, I forget which. And he's going through the garage and he finds pictures of Rowdy Piper from back in the day. Chat me up about this, man. This is crazy to see these guys playing a board game. And I understand that we're doing something different with WCW, but I like this layer of the onion, if you will, with Raven. What'd you think?
I wasn't involved in this, so I can't speak to any of the details as far as who came up with it and who was behind it, but I love it. It's interesting. It was interesting, and it still is looking at it. It's like you said, it's a layer. It's just, ooh, maybe he's not who I thought he was. What's he really like? It's far more interesting than what he was doing at that point, at least.
Really fun stuff here. We got a few more comments we need to get to as we see the NWO arriving in the backstage area. Everybody, of course, now is palling around together because we've realized this whole black and white and red and black thing. Well, the band is back together. It's OG NWO. Hulk Hogan, of course, is front and center for all this. Mr. Whisper is with us, and he says, Eric, I don't recall if you touched on wrestling tribalism before, but do you have an opinion on it? Back in WCW, you obviously wanted others to mostly watch it over WWE, but now where do you stand?
I don't stand anywhere. I'm in the middle. I'm just watching. I don't have a dog in the hunt. I have no stakes. There's nothing in it for me. I'm just like everybody else. There's Chuck Zito.
I was hoping you were going to say that. I didn't want to cut you off.
There's Mel. I can tell you an interesting story. The guy on the right, Mel, he went to prison because of this appearance. I believe he was a former member of a motorcycle club
Well, I mean, he's wearing Hell's Angels Illinois cut right here on the show.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just pointing
Got it.
out a little bit of the backstory. Evidently, because where was it? I think where was this in Kentucky? No, it was
Knoxville.
Cincinnati.
No, you're in Knoxville, Tennessee here. Eric.
Knoxville, Tennessee. Well, that individual, if I remember the story correctly, was not supposed to leave the state of Illinois, and then made primetime television, and the rest is history. If I have that right, I don't know any of the details. I only know what I remember reading a long time ago. There's Chuck Zito, though. Most people know who Chuck is.
How does Chuck Zito get involved with WCW?
Chuck is friends with Hulk at that time, still is. But Chuck was friends with everybody in Hollywood. He was very, very involved in Hollywood in a lot of different things, and just knew a lot of people. He was he's really out there and had a lot of interesting friends and relationships in Hollywood. He's done a lot of stuff on entertainment.
If I have it right, that fellow's name is Mel Chansey.
That would be Mel. And Mel right now lives in Florida. He did his time. He found the Lord. He completely turned his life around and is now very active. I don't know what his official.
He's a speaker. Yeah.
Sorry?
He's a speaker. Mel Chansey 316 on Instagram is where
he's a very spiritual guy and does a lot of great things in Tampa area, and you see him on Facebook. He's an amazing guy. He's got a hell of a backstory, though. Let me tell you.
Man, how cool is that? What a small world. The idea that someone, I mean, that's really our takeaway. You never know what sort of nugget you're going to get when you're watching old wrestling with Eric Bischoff. You'll just
want to hear another nugget.
Yeah.
The other nugget is the phone call I got from the state of South Dakota because we had been doing Sturgis in South Dakota, had a very good relationship with law enforcement, state, local, everybody. Everybody loved us. They were excited for us to come back every year. And the next morning I got back from this event. I'm in my office and I get a phone call from the FBI based in Sioux Falls and said, I don't remember what the conversation was. It was a friendly conversation, but essentially he said, you guys bring in a lot of expensive equipment in here to the motorcycle rally every year. And you know how this is out here, and you make friends with these guys and you automatically are not friends with these guys. And you may want to consider that next time you make a decision to support one or the other. He said, I'm going to send you a little information. I'd like you to take a look through it and let's talk when you're done. It was an enlightening conversation. Let's put it that way.
What do you remember 1 week removed from the finger poke of doom? I mean, I know that once upon a time we had a little bit of fun with two NWOs, NWO Hollywood and the Wolfpack. But once you've combined them, and you've even been candid before that one of the reasons you like the idea of doing a Wolfpack is everybody had the black and white NWO show. What's cooler than that? A black and red NWO shirt. Okay, I get it. But 1 week later, what do you think the strategy was here?
Honestly, Conrad, I can't remember. I don't know. And I don't want to try to pull this one out of my ass just to fill time. I don't know that we had at this point a real clear path in terms of where we were going. I think this was more about, okay, the red and black and white thing, separating the group. We've kind of run out of rope. Let's bring it back together and figure out where we really need to go. I think it was probably more that than anything.
We got a lot of questions coming in here as we see Kevin Nash cutting a babyface promo in front of the crowd he went to college at. As a reminder, we're in Knoxville, and this is indeed the arena where the Tennessee Volunteers play basketball. The building opened in '87, so I don't know that Big Daddy Cool was there and played in this particular building, but it's got to be cool for him to be back on his old college campus. Like we've all heard the big man on campus before. We're really seeing it here. Kevin Nash back on his old campus.
As long as I've known Kevin, I barely ever remember him talking about playing ball in college. It just never came up. It's like, I know it happened, but I've never heard him talking about it. I never knew if he really had a great time doing it. I know injuries were an issue for him. I think he played overseas for a while, but it never came up.
AOTV Productions is wanting to ask what you think about Hogan being booed in LA. We addressed that earlier in the episode. Appreciate you jumping in and hanging out with us. AOTV Productions also wants to know, hey, Eric, Vince Russo just recently accused Triple H of being creatively bankrupt. Is he just bitter at this point? I can't imagine. I guess I can. Maybe we're doing it for clicks, but Triple H is not creatively bankrupt. I don't see that at all. Do you?
My God. I don't think you could make a more absurd statement given the content that we've been seeing out of WWE for the last year and a half.
That's pretty crazy.
It's bizarre. It's not just crazy. It's bizarre. Why would you say that? Why would you say something so obviously stupid? Profoundly fucking stupid. If you want to just take a shot at somebody, at least be creative. Well, there you go. It's Russo.
Coach T is with us here, and he says 83 weeks live, LFG. No, thank you, man, for joining us and hanging out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications
Coach
bell.
T.
Eric and I go live all the time whenever there's breaking news or there's a major show. And every now and again, just like today, whenever we're just throwing together the podcast, this will be where you can enjoy all podcasts on Friday morning, or you could just be with us live here on Wednesday by hitting the subscribe button right now at 83weeks.com. Be sure to turn on that notifications bell so you don't miss the next time we're live. It costs nothing. It's free. Come on now. Walrads is giving me a little love. We appreciate that. Thank you for jumping on and spending some time with us tonight as we're watching the old episode of Nitro together. Moxley strikes me as someone who believes his stuff in CZW was better than anything he did in WWE. What do you guys think? That's interesting. You know, there is a contingent of people out there who believe that the WWE is like the evil empire. And I know Moxley reached the top of the mountaintop there and he was the world champ, but I think the WWE he didn't enjoy was the type that had Vince McMahon verbiage where they wanted him to have his old pal Roman Reigns say suffering succotash on TV. I don't think he hates the brand, but I do think maybe Mr. Moxley likes that underground renegade spirit. I could see him liking independence and working in Japan and sort of that tape trader vibe. What say you?
I don't know the man. I've never, ever had a conversation. I don't have a bit of an instinct as to what makes him tick. I mean, if he has any creative control over the role that he's in right now, which I think is pretty safe to assume he does, I think that's an indication of the type of attitude, the type of character, the type of storytelling and action that he prefers, which would lend credibility to the comments about his role in CZW. It just seems like that's his preferred type of character and presentation. If it wasn't, he wouldn't be doing it. Ooh, that was something. Bill looks great here.
We got to do another question here from Instagram, a wrestling historian. This is actually more of a statement. He says, Eric should be praised more for giving pay raises. Yeah, I don't know that anybody really ever talks about that too much. Like, you did help raise the pay scale incredibly. And I know that, you know, these days Tony Khan has done that too. And I know that, you know, you don't see many similarities between yourself and Tony Khan, but that is something you both deserve a little credit for, you know, helping get the boys paid correctly.
I didn't do it out of the goodness of my heart. It was business. It was about taking care of your talent and doing the best you can to and be fair. I mean, look, they knew, especially, you know, 96, it was starting to get interesting. 97, everybody, I mean, the guys, the rest, especially the ones that have been around the block for a minute, and you only need like 2 or 3 of those because they educate the locker room and the young guys pretty quick. But man, there was a lot of guys that I was working with that had been groomed in the business and trained in the business that when you showed up at the arena, you do your own head count to determine whether or not the promoter you're working for is really being fair and giving you the right percentage. If you have no idea what the gate is, you have no idea whether you're being treated fairly or not. So a lot of that talent that was being paid off a percentage of the house or working independent more or less, they were really good at counting heads. And they brought a lot of that with them. You're in WCW, you're there 92, 93, 94. All of a sudden, 95, things start changing a little bit. By 96, you're filling arenas. And they knew that we were making more money. And that's when they start talking about they should be making more too. So it's just reality. It's what unions do in a very, sophisticated way, I guess. But you have to try to manage that and anticipate it. If you wait and try to squeeze the talent while they're seeing you're making money hand over fist, it creates a pretty bad vibe. But it was just business. I don't want any credit for making people's lives better. The business made it better, and I did what I thought was the right thing to do at that time from a business perspective.
Eric, we're watching live here together from 1999, and of course, I can't believe this is real. This is 26 years ago now, and people still love this look and this set, and just the look and feel of Nitro overall. We haven't spent a ton of time talking about it, but who do you think deserves credit for like the Nitro entrance set, and even like the rings? The idea that the ring skirts, have lighting underneath and they can glow through and it'll say Nitro, and the flames on the mats around the ring. Like, is that David Crockett? Is that somebody else? Who deserves some credit for that?
Well, a lot of people deserve credit for that. The look of the show, the Nitro brand look, which the set and the lighting and everything else is a derivative of, that was really TNT. When we launched Nitro, we worked very closely with TNT and Brad Siegel, and Brad did a really good job supporting us. He brought in the right people, really, really talented people. We didn't do this in-house. We went outside. And so it started with really TNT in terms of the overall look and design. And of course, they worked directly with a number of people on the WCW side of the equation, some of it led by David Crockett, some of it led by Sharon Sadello, some of it led by Mike Weber. There were different people who were involved in different aspects of what Nitro ended up looking like. But from a production side, I would say David Crockett would be ultimately responsible for the execution of everything. But David was surrounded, and sometimes David went outside the company to bring in really good set design people. So there are a lot of people involved. There's no one person that can take credit for anything.
We just saw Rey Mysterio jump over the top there and land on poor Kaz Hayashi. He's wearing an LWO shirt, he being Rey Mysterio. And Ant Evans, who helps us a little bit here and there on YouTube, says Action Bronson, the rapper and massive wrestling fan, was on Ariel Helwani's show this morning. He said that Scott Hall made him an official NWO member. Does Eric see this as legit? What say you? Is Action Bronson a member of the NWO now, Eric?
Sure. If he says so, I'm in. At this point, welcome aboard. Hell, everybody else was. You might as well be.
I was going to say, if you'll let some of those people in and you won't let Action Bronson. What's your favorite Action Bronson song, Eric?
I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Here's the thing. Here's something I know you'll like. He had a food show. He's a heavyset rapper who's phenomenal, but he had a food show, and you'll love the title of his food television show. Are you ready for this, Eric?
Yeah.
Fuck, That's Delicious, starring Action Bronson. Isn't that great?
I'm going to have to Google that. Sounds like something I'd want to watch about 11 o'clock at night when I can't get to sleep. And I love watching cooking shows and food shows, and some of them are getting pretty entertaining. So I'm going to check it out.
So no contest here because Lex Luger has attacked Kaz Hayashi. He's telling Mysterio to take the LWO shirt off. He refused. Luger attacks him. Mysterio is going to start a little bit of comeback, and look at the crowd. They're going nuts for it. Luger's going to cut him off and beat him up. Did you see the good news? DDP has been working with Lex Luger. How cool is that?
I know. I saw that. I'm so excited for both of them. Good on Lex. And Paige is just as passionate as ever. So if anybody can pull it off, it's that combination of DDP's intensity and passion and Lex's faith in himself and in the Lord. I'm so excited to follow that.
DDP called me in like November, I think, or maybe it was October, and was telling, oh, it was October because I was on my way to Kevin Sullivan's funeral. And so as I'm on my way down there, we talked for an extended period of time, and I couldn't believe he wasn't coming. When he hung the phone up with me, he immediately booked a flight to Kevin Sullivan's funeral, and he was there an hour after me. He just dropped everything and came. But as we were talking that day before he hung up and booked the flight, we spent some time talking about Lex. And as he was talking, man, I just got chill bumps, like driving down the road. And even now, just thinking about what he told me, I'm such a big fan of Lex Luger. And if you haven't heard Lex Luger recently, I encourage you, check out his conversations with us every month at adfreeshows.com. What a light he brings to the world. What a positive influence he is on the universe in 2025. Right, Eric?
He absolutely is one of my favorite people.
Ghostface is with us here live. He says, love the pod, guys. Quick question. What was your favorite match from a fan perspective and not an insider's perspective? What match have you enjoyed the most, Eric?
I mean, tonight?
No, just in general, your all-time fandom.
Kurt Hennig, Nick Bockwinkel. They had a series, might have been 2 out of 3. Absolutely one of my favorites.
How about that? I didn't expect an answer tonight. You knew immediately. So you were watching the AWA back in the day.
Yep. Kurt was a rookie, I believe. Maybe had only been in the business for a year or two. So good. So good. Nick was amazing. To this day, every time I go back and watch something of his or somebody sends me something, I'm more impressed with how amazing he was.
Man, how cool is that? If you had to guess, because they did wrestle, between 84 and 87, when would have been your time watching those matches if you had to guess? I know you don't remember the specific match, but when you think back to your career.
I bet you it was before I got there, obviously. I would say 85, 86.
Wow.
85 would be if I had to bet, I'd bet 85.
How fun is that? So there you go. Now we know who Eric's favorite match was. Virgil Dawkins says, when TNA came up with Main Event Mafia, wasn't that literally the same concept of what Russo did with the top guys in WCW called Millionaires Club? What do you remember about Main Event Mafia, and how would you compare it to the Millionaires Club, Eric?
Main Event Mafia was before I got to TNA, so I remember it existed, but I can't tell you what. I wasn't a part of it, and it was pretty much disbanded by the time I got there, and I hadn't paid any attention to it before I got there, so I really can't tell you much about it. I mean, it looked cool. I saw a lot of the posters. Was it Booker T, Kevin Nash, Scott Steiner? Who else was in that crowd? I mean, a badass look. I mean, the look and the talent, they were all amazing talent. But I don't know much about it other than that.
We just saw the NWO spray painting K-Dog. So the former yo, let me speak on this, no longer a part of the NWO. He's kicked out here. And I saw them spray paint the back of his head. And I bring this up because we saw in the replay from last week with the finger poke of doom, they did that to Goldberg too. And I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but for some reason I remember hearing that the NWO liked to do that. Like the guys like to spray paint where they knew you didn't want them to spray paint. So if a guy came up and said, hey guys, tonight, would you mind not spraying the back of my head?
Sure.
Getting sprayed. And they did that with shirts or whatever. Do you remember hearing that if a guy said, hey, if you don't mind, I just got these tights, please don't spray these tights, they're definitely getting sprayed now just because that's wrestling?
I never heard that specifically about, getting tagged and where you got tagged and all that. But it was, to me, you don't have to be around the wrestling business for long to know that if you ask somebody not to do something, chances are they're going to do it. If you just not asked, they'll generally, everybody will do the right thing. But if you go, hey, would you please not do something? Whatever. I mean, can you imagine being on a plane with the Nasty Boys and before the plane takes off, you're flying over to Europe and you stand up in front of everybody and say, hey, would you guys do me a favor and not shave my eyebrows off while I fall asleep? Would you mind?
Yeah, that'd be tough. That'd be tough.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. You guys are the best. And then proceed to sit down, take a nap. and wake up with no eyebrows. It's that type of thing.
Isaac Riston is with us here live, and I know you're a big fan of Isaac. He's a friend of the fam here. Am I the only one who heard Vince's voice on Raw's debut opening package saying, "The boyhood dream"? Sorry if you've already touched on it. I got to say, I don't remember that. I can't say it's not there. I guess I just wasn't paying attention for it. But I think the implication here from Isaac is, do you think WWE will start to move on from Vince McMahon's name, image, and likeness? Will we see less of him in the packages? Will we hear less of his voice? Will we try to bring out the old eraser, or are they just going to move on and we just won't address it?
I get the sense they're just going to move on.
Yeah, I think so too.
I mean, I think he's as gone as he's going to be. If they've ever been motivated to make him as gone as possible, it would have happened 6 months or a year ago. And they've decided to get comfortable with whatever remnants of Vince McMahon's image they've decided upon. I can't really recall what I see. It's minor. I think it's going to be status quo. I don't think you'll see any changes. I don't think they'll start adding more Vince in, but I don't think they're going to go out of their way to eliminate what little there is left.
Talk to me a little bit about, kicking Conan out of the NWO. Conan was saying here on the program that he thought Kevin Nash was still his best friend. Everybody turns on him. Scott Hall even hits him with the taser. Fans are chanting for Goldberg, and then they're chanting for Sting. It's pretty impressive, too, that the Sting chants are so loud because he hasn't been around for a bit at this point. But was the thinking here, let's try to create some characters for the cruiserweight division, and we know Conan can be more useful there than he is here? Or what is the strategy to removing Conan? We need a leader for the LWO?
More so. Yeah, I mean, this would have been, Kevin Sullivan would have been all over this one. I don't think I was too involved other than being aware and signing off on it. In terms of the progression of the story and the reasons behind it, that really would have been Kevin more than me. So I don't have anything I can call back to. But it seems logical. The LWO was still very, very viable. The cruiserweights were an important part, at least in my eyes, important part of Nitro. So I would have more than likely talked to Kevin about making sure that we maintained the LWO and keep it strong as we possibly could. That'd be my guess. I'd be lying to you if I said I remembered.
We got the what will become the Big Show out here cutting a promo. At this point, he's still the Giant. It's written here in the newsletter at the time. It looks like he woke up 4 minutes earlier. When did you know that Paul White was leaving or interested in leaving? Did you know by this point? I mean, we know by, February, he's going to be in WWE, I guess, around Valentine's Day. I say that because that's just like 5 weeks away, but he's still on TV here. And I think a lot of people were probably surprised you were using him.
He was honest with me. He came to me right away and told me what he was thinking and what he was going to do. And he told me right away when he had an offer. There was no gamesmanship on Paul's part. So there was no reason for me to do anything other than what I needed to do with Paul to keep the show moving forward. I didn't punish people. We joked about that at the beginning of the show. Wrestling fans just love to sit back and conjure up all these, all this drama and, well, maybe this is happening because this guy feels really this way about that. This is so much bullshit. And like I said, with Paul, it just, he came to me right away, explained the situation, told me what he was hoping for. I told him I couldn't give it to him. He told me he was going to go to the WWE. I knew he was going to speak with him. And when he came back, he told me what Vince offered. I don't know. I like doing business like that. So I wasn't in any hurry to do anything differently than Paul that I would have done. Obviously I wasn't building him up and putting belts on him and things, but I wasn't going to punish him or take him off TV.
He's doing business the right way, and that's the last time Mean Gene's ever going to hold the mic for him, I believe, because this is his last show with WCW. He just got his last promo with Mean Gene, and here in a little bit, he's going to wrestle Kevin Nash in Knoxville. You're going to start referring to him as you're going to start referring to Kevin Nash as the NWO corporate giant. Of course, we know The Giant is about to become the Big Show. He debuted on a pay-per-view, ironically enough, also in Tennessee. I find that interesting that I think he's from South Carolina, and his last WCW appearance is here in Knoxville, and his first appearance for the WWF is on the other side of the state in Memphis at St. Valentine's Day Massacre. That was a cage match between Vince McMahon, or Mr. McMahon rather, and Stone Cold Steve Austin, when all of a sudden, here comes the Big Show. What a debut to be in the middle of that feud. The two hottest acts the WWF has, you know, their biggest heel, Mr. McMahon, and their biggest baby face, Stone Cold Steve Austin. When you saw that they debuted him in such a big fashion, were you surprised?
I don't think surprised, probably more concerned than surprised. I mean, WWE had been turning things around quite a bit. So I was, probably more back on my heels than surprised.
Ian McCook says, much love from Northern Ireland, guys. What do you think of the direction of Ricochet and AEW looking like a believable heel? Of course, I think the idea was we're going to debut him as a babyface. Fans started to turn against it. Maybe they didn't like the way he was being booked. And they started throwing toilet paper with him at the end of the year in those New York shows at Hammerstein. He threw it back and leaned into it. And now it feels like he's become an organic heel. I kind of dig it, you know, rather than it being the baby face that people were not digging, just lean into what the fans are doing. The fans will tell you. What say you, Eric?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of what we talked about earlier with Hobbs and Moxley. You know, if it's not working, go in another direction as quickly as possible. And, you know, credit where credit is due to whoever deserves it, whether it was Tony or Ricochet, but leaning into it, embracing it, and make it work for you is a classic. You're going to turn, you know, chicken shit into chicken salad. It's good for them.
Nick says, if he could go back, would he take more control of all the bookings instead of leaving it up to others like Sullivan and Nash, to name a few? That's an interesting question. Do you ever think about, with the benefit of hindsight, that you would have been a little more involved with creative, or no?
Not at that time. I mean, I was learning on the job and I had certain talents. There were certain things, you know, not a lot of people argue with that, but you know, if you look at the body of work that I was directly responsible for, from the creation of Nitro and the kind of core values of what Nitro was and how it was different than the WWE when we went head to head. I have good instincts. I have good creative instincts, but there was also a lot about psychology. There was a lot about the technical side of wrestling that I wasn't good at and didn't have the experience in. So my judgment wasn't as good as it needed to be, or at least I needed to be surrounded by people with other perspectives so I could kind of check myself, or other people could check me when necessary. I wouldn't have been able to step into a more pronounced role than I did at that time. Do I wish I would have had the knowledge, experience, and perspective then that I do now? And would that have been different? That'd have been a lot different. But that's 20/20 hindsight, and 20 years of experience.
We're seeing Booker T wrestle Lenny Lane here. I want to point out that Booker T enjoyed a really fun 1998. He became more of a singles wrestler that year, but 1999 is where he's going to start to get some title shots. Or I guess he got some title shots in late 99 or 98 rather. But here in 99, he's going to become TV champ in just a couple of months, beating Scott Steiner. And we know, he's eventually going to become the U.S. champion and the world champion. And it's a big opportunity for Booker T in 1999. Who were his biggest advocates behind the scenes?
I don't know that there was anybody that I would say was the biggest. I would say he had across the board support. There was nobody that wasn't a big supporter of Booker T. I mean, he had everybody's respect. I couldn't put anybody at the top of the list, though. That would suggest that there were people who weren't as excited about Booker T. That wasn't the case. It was pretty much across the board.
Whenever you have a proven tag team. I mean, the Harlem Heat are the most decorated tag team in WCW history. Booker T won more titles in WCW than anybody else. And a lot of that was because of the success as tag champs. So in 99, we're going to see, Booker T become the television champ, and he's also going to become the tag champ 3 more times. By the year 2000 rolls around, we're going to see him become the world champ. Is there a best practice or what have you used in your experience when you have these tag teams that are successful, but now it's time to do something else? Because you had to do this with not just Harlem Heat, but with the Steiners as well. And I know you had seen, young, great tag teams like the Rockers, and at different times you had seen the Freebirds and the Rock and Rolls and even the Midnight Express. We saw Bobby Eaton in singles action. So you had seen it a lot, but the 2 biggest, most perhaps WCW tag teams of all time were Scott Steiner and his brother Rick Steiner, along with another pair of brothers, the Harlem Heat, and you had to break them up. And I'm wondering, does that dynamic different because they're related? Are you more sensitive to that? What was your experience with breaking up those brother tag teams?
I treat them just like 2 totally individuals. Didn't really think about the brother aspect unless it was part, of the story. If it had something to do with them splitting up, for example, or maybe coming back together down the road. But other than that, they're 2 separate characters, and you want to get the most out of each one of them. They have different things to offer individually than they do as a team, and you have to think about them differently.
We just saw a clip of you guys breaking the ring on Thunder with the Big Show.
This is the worst thing this is bad. This is like really bad.
What you mean, Scott Hall selling the ring?
Yeah, the selling part was really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea of breaking down the ring, nothing I'm real proud of there, but the selling kind of exacerbated it.
I like the idea of we suplex the big guy in the ring, and he's so big and we're so strong that we broke the damn ring. And you guys did that before anybody else. So I do want to give you some credit for that. And I got to give you some credit for this too. We're seeing like a little miniature movie here, and what looks like the original set, and I'm sure it's not, but it's positioned and shot in a way where we're trying to make it look like the original NWO vignettes. So they're black and white, and they've got the big screens around them. And we see a seated Kevin Nash and Hollywood Hogan. And Hollywood Hogan here in full Wolfpack stuff. I mean, he's even got the Wolfpack t-shirt on. And they're talking about what an incredible match it was. It was the toughest match of either of their careers. And of course, we're showing replays of the Finger Poke of Doom. I don't think this ever really gets talked about. When people cover the Finger Poke of Doom, they almost talk about January 4th like it's in a vacuum. But this adds a little more context to it, I think, Eric, don't you?
It does. And again, the dirt sheet narrative was, it was the worst thing in the history of WC. It was the beginning of the end. That's the accepted narrative about the Finger Poke of Doom. But if you go back and look at the ratings that followed the Finger Poke of Doom, they were very, very strong. So the internet narrative about it and the reality of it at the time are 2 different things.
I wanted to ask you, there's a great comment here that I think is interesting from Jay, who's with us live here on YouTube. And they're making a comparison to football, Eric. And I know you've admitted you're not necessarily the biggest football team or football fan, but you know who the biggest team is. Like if you had to guess just revenues and fan base and all that, just using your business brain, who do you think the biggest team in the NFL is?
Money wise, I don't know. It's got to be a New York team, right?
It's the Dallas Cowboys, and it's been the Dallas Cowboys forever. They're positioned as America's team. And, there's lots of licensing agreements that the NFL has that Jerry Jones has decided the Dallas Cowboys are not going to participate in. They're just going to do their own thing. And as a result, they've become the most profitable franchise by a lot. And Jay, who's with us here live, says Tony Khan is the Jerry Jones of wrestling. He's got his fingers in too much stuff. He's got to hire some real writers for storylines, etc. Tony needs to take a back seat. Now, I bring that up to you because I am friends with a lot of hardcore Cowboys fans. our producer, stupid ass Dave Silva, he is among them. And almost all of them will tell you the biggest problem with the Cowboys is Jerry Jones. They don't have problems with personnel or players or stadiums. And when they have coaching problems, it's because the owner, Jerry Jones, picked the wrong coach, or he didn't allow that coach to pick his own groceries. And he was a little too involved in being the general manager. And even Jerry Jones, when he was asked about this recently, he says, hey, I have no intent to retire. I bought this to do until I couldn't do it anymore. And that's what I intend to do. And I'm going to do it with my family. And I found that interesting. What do you think of this comparison that Tony Khan is the Jerry Jones of wrestling? I'd never heard that before.
Do you watch the new series Landman?
I do, yes. He made a cameo in there.
He made a cameo, and he talked about this very thing with Billy Bob Thornton, or at least part of it. He made it clear in that cameo that he bought this team because it was his dream to run it with his family. And it's a little bit like, it's a vanity project. It's a big mucker-father, and it's profitable. So there's the difference between Jerry and Tony. But the over-involvement, absolutely. It's a hobby for Tony. That's what this is. It is a vanity project / hobby. And it's reaching all of Tony's personal goals. Apparently. He's not under any financial pressure, and he doesn't want to give up any control. So he's doing exactly what he wants to do. And if that's the only parameter, if that's the only goal, is that Tony's having fun and he can afford to have that kind of fun, it is what it is. I've kind of given up. I don't really have much hope anymore. And just looking at it for what it is. It's one person's dream job that he was able to fund and create. That's what it is. It won't be anything different than that ever. I don't think, like Jerry Jones, that he'll turn it into one of the most successful franchises in the industry. That's never going to happen. Clearly.
Well, nobody's saying that about the Cowboys right now. I mean, even Troy Aikman was on TV this past week when people were saying, oh, this is one of the most coveted jobs, because the Cowboys just let go of their coach, or Mike McCarthy's not going to be back. So the Cowboys are looking for a new coach. And Eric, the speculation is, or it's not even a speculation, Deion Sanders says he called him. And there's lots of people in the NFL world who are saying, yeah, because no real coach wants to go work for Jerry Jones. So you've got to go to these sideshows like Deion Sanders. I'm not saying he is, but that is the narrative out there, that he's not a serious NFL head coach yet. Deion Sanders, that is. So, yeah, even Troy Aikman's on TV saying this is not a coveted job anymore. And he's, Hall of Fame, legendary Super Bowl winning quarterback with the Cowboys, saying in a loud and clear voice, not anymore. It's interesting to think about what's next for the Cowboys, but also to hear someone make that comparison for Tony Khan, because that never even crossed my mind.
Yeah, no, I've heard the criticism of Jerry Jones for years now, that he doesn't let his coaches coach, and he's too involved in the game, and he's trying to call plays from the suite and things like that. So that narrative about Jerry Jones has been out there forever, and everybody knows that Tony's the head booker. He's the president, CEO, head of creative, head of wrestling operation. He's got about 6 titles. And as long as that's the case, you're probably going to have the same problem with AEW that you have with finding a winning season for the Dallas Cowboys. But if you're Deion Sanders, do you take that job going in, knowing you don't really have any NFL experience? It takes time. It's a different situation than Colorado State or wherever he's coaching. Do you go into that job for 2 or 3 years knowing it's not the best job in the world, but you're going to make a name for yourself in the NFL? Get that experience.
I don't know. I think Deion might be exposed there. I'd keep having fun in college, and
I would too.
I'd that out a little while. Hey, we're watching a pretty fun thing when you think about it with the benefit of hindsight. 3 Georgia boys, Diamond Dallas Page, coming to the ring, coming through the crowd and waiting for him in the ring, Scott Steiner and Buff Bagwell. I think you and I both really enjoyed their act together. We saw Buff paired with Luger, and we saw Buff paired with Scotty Riggs, and we saw Buff paired with Too Cold Scorpio. We saw Buff paired with Scott Steiner. And the Scott Steiner pairing with Buff, I think, is my favorite. And I don't even know why exactly. What say you?
I think so, because it was kind of like it was a contrasting characters. I mean, Buff was put together, obviously, but Buff was the
hype man,
the smart ass, kind of cocky little cute boy, and Scott Steiner was a killer, and that contrast made them interesting.
Little did we know. Oh, and Little Nate is the ref. Man, what
a career this guy's had, right?
Still doing his thing today on WWE programming. It's wild.
Look at this. You know what else is wild is this crowd. It's a good looking crowd. I mean, they're not only is it, look good on camera, but they're very, very into what we're doing.
And what's interesting too, Eric, is you do have majority men there, but man, you got a lot of ladies in the crowd. You got a lot of kids in the crowd. I think that's interesting to take a look at, just, the makeup of the crowds, because, they've changed through the years for sure.
It tells you everything, right? If it's a testicle festival, kind of like ECW was, it's a niche product. AEW has a little nichiness to it in that regard. WCW certainly had it for a long time until 97, 98, and it became more family, more women, better looking women. Better looking women usually means more guys, more women. It was kind of like a fun spiral. It was a life spiral instead of a death spiral. But you're right, man. The composition of your crowd tells you just about everything you need to know. It says a lot to your advertisers, too. It says a lot to your advertisers beyond just what they get out of a Nielsen guide.
We're watching Scott Steiner here wrestle Diamond Dallas Page. They're not yet wrestling each other for the world title, but that's what the world title picture is going to look like in the coming years here in WCW. This is going to be a pay-per-view main event before you know it. But recently, we've heard a lot from Scott Steiner. He did a few interviews talking about his son, who's been at Jacksonville State University playing football. And he has expressed interest, his son has, in getting in the family business. Of course, he knows what his dad did and what his uncle did, and now he sees what his cousin, Braun Breaker, is doing. And he's expressed interest in doing stuff with WWE. Scott Steiner has even come out and said that he's buried the hatchet with Triple H. Once upon a time, they didn't get along that great, but they've agreed to let bygones be bygones, and he's excited that his son is going to follow in his footsteps. It certainly looks like he's going to be a part of the WWE ID program and then later developmental. We've seen what Braun Breaker has been doing. How pumped are you now to see that? Well, there's Rick Steiner's son. Oh, what do you know?
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
Your son.
I love that, man. That lineage is awesome. And the talent there. Now, of course, I don't know what Scott's son looks like, but Braun Breaker, man, is there anybody in his peer group, his age group, that are as exciting as he is, that have that much potential? If there are, I'm not sure who it is right now.
Man, how wild is it to think about the next generation of the Steiner brothers? Perhaps we're going to see that. I can't wait. But one of the things I'm excited that I'm not going to be seeing in 2025 are me overpaying anymore, thanks to Rocket Money. The start of a new year is the perfect time to get organized, set goals, and prioritize what matters most. For me, a top priority is my financial wellness, and that feels more important than ever right now in America. But thanks to Rocket Money, my goals feel achievable. They show me all of my subscriptions right in one place, and they can easily help me cancel the ones that I forgot about that I've been paying for. Rocket Money also pulls together all of my spending across all of my different accounts, so I can clearly track my spending habits and see where I can cut back. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that will help you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and even lower your bills so you can grow your savings. You get to see it all on this dashboard, and then Rocket Money will take care of the rest. You find something you don't want anymore, you hit the button, they take it from there. They've even got a new goals feature, which will automatically start saving money for you. You can even get alerts if your bills increase in price or if there's unusual spending activity. Even if you're getting close to going over your budget, no matter what your goals are, Rocket Money can help, and they can even try to help you renegotiate your bills. Yeah, they can negotiate to lower your bills for you. It's a new thing they started doing last year, and now they automatically scan your bills to just look for those opportunities to save. And then they do the hard work. They negotiate on your behalf. They deal with customer service. You don't do anything. Rocket Money already has over 5 million users. They've saved those folks over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. And on average, members save up to $740 a year when they use all the app's premium features. So go cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. All you got to do is go to rocketmoney.com/83weeks today. That's rocketmoney.com/83weeks. One more time, rocketmoney.com/83weeks. Man, we're talking over a pretty good match here with DDP and Scott Steiner. They're giving them some time today.
They're tearing it up. The first part, I would say the first 10 minutes of this match, 8 minutes of this match were intense. They just pounded the piss out of each other. It was pretty fun to watch.
We got to do a few more questions here. Oh, shout out to Luke, who's joined us and throwing in for the calls. Appreciate you checking us out. Too sweet, my man. Luis Martinez says, I heard Cornette say Meltzer must be insane if he thinks Tony would have done a better job running WCW than you did because of all the egos you had to deal with. How long would Tony have lasted? Man, what a weird question that is. But I do think it's interesting that Cornette's giving you your flowers saying, hey, man, if Tony thinks it's tough now, go deal with Hogan and Randy Savage and Roddy Piper and Ric Flair and Kevin Nash and. Man, when you keep going like that, it was a pretty unenviable task at times, was it not?
It was horrible. Yeah, and I don't think Tony would have lasted. It's funny. And I don't think Cornette was giving me any flowers. I just think it's such an obvious, sad situation in terms of leadership. Tony would be so far over his head. It's not even funny. He's over his head right now.
Chris Britton says, as the one making the final call and a lot of egos in the room, what was the biggest dispute between the boys that you had to deal with in WCW? Do you remember the biggest issue? Like, was there one that just got to a point where you just dreaded waking up and dealing with it? Or you'd come home, it was like, finally, I don't have to anymore. It was just exhausting. A few personalities in particular, or one issue in particular.
There was a point in time, and I can't tell you exactly when it was, but the relationship, first of all, it was never an issue. It was always a communication surrounding an issue. The communication could sometimes really be shitty between top talent. And when the communication would start breaking down, things would start getting personal. Once things got personal, it wasn't really business anymore. That's when it got ugly. And there was I think it was 98, summer 98. We were on our way to Sturgis. And I think we might have been in Idaho Falls on our way because we kind of road tripped and we put on events along the way, one or two. And I think it was in Idaho Falls, and the relationship between Hulk and Kevin and Scott had gotten so bad and it was so tense that I found myself standing in the middle of those three guys, knowing the way things are going, or at least thinking the way things were going, that I was going to get in the middle of something that I was going to get hurt in, and that it was going to get ugly. It got really close, like really close. But cooler heads prevailed. That was like the only time that I remember things escalating to the point where I was pretty sure it was going to get ugly physical, beyond ugly, because there were some serious issues at that particular time. And then, as it almost always did, it worked itself out eventually, but it was bad. It was really bad.
You know, it is interesting to think about how this crop of guys we're watching right now on Nitro in 1999 would have dealt with Tony Khan. What do you think a Hulk Hogan Tony Khan or a Kevin Nash Tony Khan exchange looks like? Like, wouldn't that be interesting to even think about? Like, You dealing with today's talent could be interesting, but Tony dealing with talent from back then, I think would also be an interesting dynamic.
Not for long. Not for long. It would be sad. I mean, look, well, I don't want to talk about Tony. Tony's doing what Tony wants to do and he can afford to do. So good luck, Tony. Have fun.
Well, I didn't mean in a confrontational way. I just mean creatively, like knowing how it seems like Tony Khan really puts, in-ring work and matches above all else at times. And I get that.
I don't know, man. I think that's a narrative that I know is floating, like we're the best wrestler. I've seen some of the most embarrassing garbage called professional wrestling on network television, cable network, that I've ever seen out of AEW. I think we're the best. Yes. Are there some talents there that are physically beyond gifted? Yep. They don't draw a dime. They're not drawing a dime. They're losing audience every week. They're not the stars that people think they are. And the quality of the wrestling is not as great as the narrative about it.
Well, I guess what I was talking about was specifically just the focus on matches. Like, do you think in a Tony Khan led WCW, we would have seen, wait a minute, there's a new report out. Let me click on this. I'm just fascinated to think about, would we have seen Rey Mysterios in the Cruiserweight prioritized more? Would we have seen Chris Benoit in main events in WCW before the very end? Would Eddie Guerrero have main evented a pay-per-view or had a shot at the world title? Like, it does make me wonder, would he have advanced the style of wrestling? Because we know that he was a Dave Meltzer disciple. I don't know that he is anymore, but I think he was a tape trader. I know he was on message boards. So, what we grew up with, Eric, was reports from people who had seen these great matches. This is pre-internet being where it is now, where if you wanted to see that footage, you had to know someone who had a tape of it, which meant they lived there and they recorded it on TV and then they shipped it all the way here. Like, that's what we had to go through to see some of these great All Japan matches or New Japan or even the spectacles for FMW and so forth. So reading about it in the newsletter, it was written about in a way where, hey man, these characters and these matches feel really important and better than what we have and larger than life. And it almost becomes like the great band that you heard before they were famous. Like my grandfather saw Elvis Presley play before he was famous Elvis Presley. So he would tell everybody that, he was in on the Elvis thing before the masses knew. So that's the way wrestling was. And I don't think it necessarily is that way anymore. But I could almost get it. Like, I think in different parts of the world, people look up to American pop culture. And, you can see some of these international tours where there are songs being sang in English where that is not their native tongue. So it's just interesting to think about, would he have advanced? Would he have tried to placate that back then and played to the newsletters and the Dave Meltzers and the Wade Kellers of the world back then? What effect that would have had on wrestling, if any?
I don't even know how to comment on that, honestly.
All right, we'll let you talk for a little bit, Eric. I've done a lot of talking today, so I'm gonna.
No, I mean I'm trying, but it's a hypothetical that I can't. Look, Tony is a goof. Tony is collecting little wrestling toys and living his 14-year-old Tony Khan. I'm an ECW fan, wrestling fantasy, to try to, somehow project that based on his wrestling mentality currently that he would somehow have the foresight because he reads Dave Meltzer's dirt sheet to look for some international talent and bring them to life. It's a hypothetical that is so far removed from any sense of reality that I can't react to it. I wish I could. I wish I could help fill time and add some color to something that is hard to wrap my head around as that, but I'm not that good. I wish I was. I'm sorry.
Tell us what we're seeing here as we see you working on putting the ring up.
I was good at that. Doc Beal taught me well.
Just looking for any context about filming that day. Just trying to fill the space here as we got 42 minutes of Nitro left.
What was that like? It was fun for me. It was a different character for me. Anytime, if you like to perform, if performing is just inherently fun for you and you gravitate towards it, the opportunity to do anything that's different than what you normally do is kind of fun. It's like a paid vacation in a way. You get to react to different things and different people. And I never thought I'd be performing a skit or a scene with Klondike Bill, but he actually came out of his shell and got into it. I didn't know he had it in him.
You know, Klondike Bill obviously has become a legendary character on Tony Schiavone's podcast. Do you have any fun Klondike Bill stories you can share with us?
Just the one we're watching. I didn't, Klondike was one of those guys you see. I'd see him every week. He was there, but he was quiet, and I had my own shit to do, and I wasn't involved in any of the things that Klondike Bill was involved in as far as getting to bring up. And, we didn't sit down and, share dinner or lunch and catering or anything like that. So this is the first time that I really had any interaction with him. And like I said a minute ago, I was kind of surprised that he was able to come out of his shell as much as he did. Of course, he was a former wrestler and had been used to being in the ring and being in front of people, but I didn't really know that at the time. I didn't know much about Klondike Bill at that point.
Is this the first time you've ever worked on putting a ring together, or did you do that?
Can you tell? Like this is not a work. Nobody said he. This is pretty much grab those ropes and bring them into the ring. Of course, I exaggerated it and had more fun with it, but yeah, I had no idea how a ring went together. I wasn't one of those guys like Shane McMahon was, or I'm sure many others who, you want to break into business, kid, learn how to put up the ring. No, I wasn't one of those guys. I lucked into the business.
Do you know who made the rings? Like, this is not a high spots ring. That wasn't a thing back then. Is Klondike Bill doing that, or do you guys have a specific contract, or any chance you remember that?
I don't remember who it was, but I remember we had one person that was kind of our go-to person, but I honestly couldn't tell you. I think if I had to guess, it landed somewhere between Jody Hamilton and Klondike.
When you're seeing the ring put together like this, were there any old timers who were hesitant or resistant? I know that a lot of non-fans believe that the wrestling ring is more like a trampoline. And Eric, you and I know that is not the case, but you are really showing exactly how a wrestling ring is made here. On the one hand, I would think, hey, that's a good thing. We're showing people that there really is just exposed 2x4s underneath with just this thin little padding over the top and then the canvas stretched over that. I think that adds to the realism of it, but I'm wondering whether any old timers who thought, man, they can't see that. We're showing them too much.
I didn't hear that. Nobody would have said something like that to me. Doesn't mean they didn't say it behind my back or to each other, but I didn't get any feedback like that. But I'm like you, especially after having seen it like this, there's nothing that we're exposing that makes that ring look any less dangerous or any more comfortable. That padding isn't much of a pad. So no, I don't recall that. And it certainly wasn't something that crossed my mind.
We're doing one more sold out after sold out 99. That'll be sold out 2000. Then it will die a merciful death. Of course, we had sold out 97, which was the very first one, 98, which is where we had Brett versus Flair. And this is the go home Nitro for sold out 99 at the Charleston Civic Center in Charleston, West Virginia. We'd see Chris Benoit wrestle Mike Enos in a 10.5-minute match. Yes, Mike Enos on pay-per-view in 1999. Then we would see Norman Smiley wrestle Chavo Guerrero, and they got 15 minutes on pay-per-view. And then it's Fit Finlay and Van Hammer. I'm sure everyone was thrilled to spend $30 to watch a pay-per-view match with Van Hammer.
It was a talk of the town.
Yeah. So a main event anywhere in the world, Eric. Bam Bam Bigelow beat Wrath, and then Lex Luger would beat Conan. Chris Jericho would beat Perry Saturn in a loser wears a dress match. Everyone expected Jericho to lose that because we all know he was leaving. But swerve, bro. Even before he's here, Perry Saturn is going to be sporting that dress. Billy Kidman is going to win a fatal four-way match for the WCW Cruiserweight Championship. A lot of talent in there with Billy. You got Ray Jr., you got Juventud, you got Psychosis. And then there's a tag match. I kind of forgot this was even a thing. Rick and David Flair with Arn Anderson in their corner, picking up a win over Kurt and Barry Windham. And then in the main event, and this is not a Vince Russo match, it's Goldberg and Scott Hall in a stun gun ladder match. Of course, we know Goldberg's reign came at the hands of a stun gun. That's become a new Scott Hall thing. You see him stunning him here when they did the finger poke of doom the week before. And even earlier the night, we saw him being Scott Hall. We saw him tase Conan. What do you think of the taser gimmick overall, Eric?
Got a lot of negative reaction. I don't think it was dynamic enough. I mean, everybody knows, taser, cattle prod. Yeah, they use them to move cattle around, and you got about 9 batteries in them or whatever it is. But it's just not visual enough. It's a cheap way out. Didn't work very well for us, to be honest with you.
We're finally back to the show after packages and you putting together the ring. And we are going to see some more wrestling. One of the matches we're going to see is Ric Flair and Kurt Hennig. But first, we're going to see Scott Hall and Bam Bam Bigelow. I think once upon a time, those guys had an issue with each other dating back to their WWF days. Maybe it was Click related. I know that it all came to a head once upon a time with Scott Hall going to visit some friends for ECW. Do you remember having any behavioral issues or talent issues with Bam Bam Bigelow? What was your Bigelow experience like, Eric?
It was short, right? I mean, he came in. I think Bam Bam had I don't want to say he had a chip on his shoulder, but I think his expectations were a little out of line. I think he, in his mind, and this is probably true with a lot of talent, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think Bam Bam came in thinking his stock was significantly higher than I did and the audience did. I just think he adjusted. I think he came in expecting to be kind of at the level that he may have been at one point in WWE, and it just wasn't there for him. And it was a crowded roster. It would be pretty hard to come into WCW at that point in time and find yourself at the top of the roster. It just wasn't going to happen. So I don't think my impression was him that he came in with a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. Things didn't necessarily go great for him right off the bat. And his attitude, I won't say it was a bad attitude. It's not like they never had an issue with him, but you could tell when a guy's not happy. It's pretty obvious.
Well, I wanted to say, I don't know. I mean, he came in almost immediately calling out. I think he debuted in November of '98. And I thought in his debut interview, he was calling out Goldberg. And I know that when Goldberg lost the title at Starrcade, not only was Scott Hall there with the taser, but Bam Bam Bigelow was there too. So I could see, hey, if I'm the former ECW world champion, Bam Bam Bigelow, coming in fresh off of that, and I'm immediately in a program with Goldberg, I realize Goldberg's the guy who beats everybody in 2 minutes and it's a part of a streak. But I would think, man, that's a pretty good spot to be in. You're debuting and working with one of the top guys in the world champ, right?
One would think. One would think. But again, I didn't know. I never got to know Bam Bam real well. I can't honestly say that I knew for sure that he expected to be used in a more significant role than he was, but that was just the impression that I had. Like I said, he had a chip on his shoulder. Wasn't the friendliest guy. He probably had good relationship with a lot of the other talent, but I just never clicked with him. Like I said, it wasn't adversarial, but I never got a good vibe from him either.
It's a shame that we never saw more of Bigelow, because I know he's going to be here with WCW through the end. And when WCW goes out of business, he opts not to take the buyout and just keeps getting those checks. I think his contract isn't up until like June of 2002. So that's around the same time that Jeff is starting TNA, but he just does some indies. And unfortunately, he's another one of those sad stories who passed away way, way too soon. Man, how sad is it? I just realized both Scott Hall and Scott Bigelow, neither one with us anymore. That sucks.
Yeah, it's so hard to believe with Scott, when I sit back and I watch him like this, and like I said, it just seems like yesterday, and it's still hard to believe he's not here. Listen.
Luke is with us here live. He wants to know, Eric, thank you for being someone I've looked up to my whole life. Any plans coming to Australia again? Anything on the books, Eric?
Not for Australia. I think I'm going to be in Scotland in the summer, but I haven't had any contact. Nobody's reaching out from Australia, wanting me to come over and wrestle, and that's just fine. I think I'm kind of, I'm over the long trips and overseas tours. It's kind of tough nowadays, and I've had a great time in Australia. I've been there several times and enjoyed every minute of it, but I'm pretty satisfied just to stay in my own country.
We've got a fun night here of Nitro that we're watching, but we're head to head, of course, with Monday Night Raw. They're in Houston, Texas at the Compact Center. And that night we would see Owen Hart team up with Jeff Jarrett to take on the New Age Outlaws in a tag title match. We'd see Luna Vachon wrestle Gilbert. We'd see X-Pac beat Al Snow to retain the WWF European title. We'd also see Kane beat Mankind in a WWF Championship match, but it's by DQ, so the belt doesn't change hands. We'd see Triple H beat Edge in under 3 minutes. And then in our main event, we would see Chyna win the Corporate Rumble by last eliminating Vince McMahon after McMahon was distracted by Steve Austin at ringside. In order of entry, we saw Ken Shamrock, the Big Boss Man, Test, X-Pac, Road Dogg, Kane, Triple H, Vince McMahon, and Chyna, who was unsanctioned, but Chyna wins. And so therefore, she's got the 30th most lucrative spot in the Royal Rumble match. Shane McMahon was doing commentary here. And this is also the same episode of Raw where The Undertaker would sacrifice Dennis Knight and transform him into Midian. Creatively, you've been asked, and I mean, we've just beat you up for years here about Blood Runs Cold and how terrible it was and how we didn't really like it, but it was probably just poor timing if it had come out right at the same time that Mortal Kombat was getting hot, when WCW was a little more silly, things like the Dungeon of Doom. If that would have come around in, say, 94 or 95, maybe it could have hit, but by 96, it just felt out of place. Well, here we are now in 99, and on the other channel, Eric, I just told you that The Undertaker sacrificed someone. Why don't you think that bit of creative gets beat up the same way Blood Runs Cold does? I know that everybody loves The Undertaker and he's a top guy, and I get it. But sacrificing dudes, come on.
Part of it is, I think, because people just have so much respect for The Undertaker that it's hard to criticize things that even if they should have been criticized at the time, part of it was the narrative. WWE was getting hot at this point. It's a little more difficult to be critical of a brand that's getting hot. Mistakes and bad ideas don't look as bad when you're starting to grow and you're building your audience. I think that's part of it. And the other part of it is just, there were certain dirt sheet writers at the time who just were anti-WCW and looking for everything they could to rip apart. And because so much of the narrative was about, Bischoff has Ted Turner's checkbook and he's just spending money ridiculously and overspending here and spending too much on this guy and that guy, and spending $500 million he paid to Kiss, whatever $500,000 or whatever it ended up being, none of which is true, by the way. But there was so much of that narrative in the dirt sheets and early, digital, that it just kind of becomes something in a story that's easy to tell for people that don't know any better. It wasn't necessarily true, but because we spent a lot more money on the Blood Runs Cold gimmick than probably had ever been spent before on creating a new character or set of characters. And it was a big risk at that time. And it didn't work. So it's easy to make fun of, or it's easy to point out as a mistake. But, shit happens. Some stuff works. The only people who can say they've never screwed up anything in the creative side of the business is people that's never been in the creative side of the business and actually gotten paid for being a creative person. You're going into this, no matter how good you are, you're going to come up with a bad idea every once in a while. WWE has, and certainly we did. No question about it. Bill Goldberg looks a little bit like a jacked up Billy Kidman right here. I
The
guess my
backward
eyes
tap's
reading, but
not
that's
the
what I
best.
thought it was.
I know he's trying to be too cool for school, but I think he's so identifiable with the bald head. I don't think I'd ever have him wear a baseball cap.
No, it's no, or even leading in that position. I mean, I
Yes.
guess we all knew how powerful he was and how big his character was, but that just, honestly, as I'm talking to you, I thought out of the corner of my eye, I thought that was Billy Kidman for a second.
Yeah. It wasn't playing to his strengths. Hey, I wanted to ask you if you saw this. This is interesting from Frank Rosano. Actually, no, before we do Frank's question, we just recapped what happened on Raw. Heads up with you guys. And China won in the main event, the corporate rumble. She's going to win number 30. We've talked before about how you sort of created World War III as your way of having your own sort of battle royal rumble style. And World War III just never clicked the way the Royal Rumble does for a variety of reasons. The anticipation, the countdown, the anticipation. There you go. But China, yeah, I find it interesting that she's getting the mega push here in the WWF in 1999. She's going to be in the men's rumble, come in at 30. Later in the year in October, we know she's going to beat Jeff Jarrett on pay-per-view and become the Intercontinental Champion. So they're starting to push her in that direction. I know you don't have China, but I wanted to ask, if you did at the time, would you have been able to present her with standards and practices and the way that evolved in the same manner? I mean, I know you had one-offs with Miss Jackie and Disco Inferno. I know there was a one-off with Medusa and like Evan Courageous or some cruiserweight. I know Oklahoma, but that was all sort of tongue-in-cheek and really positioned as a one-off. China, do you think if you really got behind her and had the machine behind her, would Turner Corporate have been okay with that, meaning her doing battle with guys?
I think so, because she was a different type of character. You could put China in the ring with a lot of guys, and it wasn't obvious that she may have been at a disadvantage, or perhaps she wasn't at a disadvantage physically. I mean, she was a very, very unique individual. There were very few women that looked the way she looked and wrestled the way she wrestled. She wasn't just jacked up. She was big, she was powerful looking, and she could work. So you would have been able to sit down probably with Standard and Practices or anybody else that might have an issue with it and just lay it out as, no, this is just a woman that she can go. She can compete. And it wasn't gratuitous the way it was with so many of the other women that we used, WCW used, and even WWE had used in the past. She was in a category unto herself. She was unique in that respect. And the best way to say it, she was justifiable in the ring.
We see Ric Flair coming to the ring here now to take on Kurt Hennig. We're going to talk about the match in just a minute, but Dave Meltzer would say this was the best match on this night on either show, on either Raw or on Nitro. Are you a little surprised that when her WWF run was over, I'm talking, of course, about China, she has her last match against Lita. It's at a pay-per-view, and I think it's May of 2001. We don't see her again for like 10 years, and she pops up in 2011 and has one match on pay-per-view with the Jarretts for TNA, and that's it. I know she had some matches in Japan for New Japan and some other independent promotions in Japan, but I'm kind of surprised with as much name recognition and brand recognition. I know Vince owns China, but I'm kind of surprised that we never saw her do anything else. And I know that timing is everything. It's not like there was a bunch of other American promotions, but it just feels like if, man, her split came with the WWF in, say, 96, boy, she would have been all over WCW programming, I bet. Don't you?
Possibly. She would have had a lot of support, and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and Sean Waltman. She would have had a fan base there and people that would have been willing to speak up for her and help get her a shot. But look, she left WWE. She was having quite a few personal problems afterwards, wasn't she? Do you think that might have been part of why we didn't see her anywhere else?
No.
No?
No. She didn't leave WWE because she was having personal problems.
Say that again. I'm confused.
China did not leave WWE because she had personal problems.
No, It's not what I said, or it's not what I meant to say if I did. What I meant to say was when she did leave WWE, subsequent to leaving is when she started to have personal problems, if I recall correctly, and I may not.
No, that's correct. Yes.
And my question then was, do you think that was the cause as in terms of why we didn't see her anywhere else after that?
Well, there was nowhere else to go. I mean, the TNA wasn't doing anything. I mean, respectfully, they were paying guys, $100 to $500 a week to wrestle. So, this is a person who made hundreds of thousands of dollars in wrestling and sold millions of copies of Playboy. It's just unlikely to me to think that they would have been able to do anything. And yes, by the time they got her in 2011, she was probably in the throes of addiction. But I think that was all born out of there wasn't another opportunity. Like there wasn't another place for her to go to. And I can't help but wonder, had that split happened sooner, had her star risen a little sooner, and she had an opportunity to, hey, I'm going to go work for ECW for a bit and see what Paul Heyman does with my character, or I'm going to come to WCW, because it's not like you guys had an issue coming up with a different name. Hell, you had your own jacked up female and you named her Asia. With the benefit of hindsight, do you regret doing that? Does that feel a little lame, or did you like that at the time?
I was ambivalent about it. It didn't strike me as something that I thought had legs and we could get excited about, but it was filler entertainment. Wasn't bad, but wasn't great either. Now, I'm not embarrassed about it, of course.
Her being part of the NWO, though, China as a member of the NWO, that would have been cool. I could see that.
It could have been very cool. Could have had some fun with her and Scott Steiner.
Also cool to seeing Ric Flair wrestle Mr. Perfect. This is one of the last times you're going to see these guys hook it up. And Meltzer even say, write this down. The last good match Kurt had was June 11th, 1999, because it's going to be a while. This was the best match on either show. Not that it was great or anything, but it was good. Wyndham interfered regularly and clotheslined David. Of course, that's what we're all about here. This is the go home for Sold Out. We know we're aiming towards a tag match. It's going to be Kurt and Barry against Rick and David. And this is a very young David Flair. I mean, we're here in January of 1999. I mean, he's 19, about to be 20. I mean, you talk about thrown to the wolves. That's where David Flair is here.
Yeah. This is, I mean, even the way he's dressed, I mean, if I feel guilty about anything, it's that we probably could have spent a lot more time trying to get David Flair ready. And even if it's just the little things, yeah, he should have come out there looking, if he's going to wear street clothes, look like Ric Flair's son. Even if he didn't wear that, out in everyday wear, he should have been more, he should have represented some kind of a character as opposed to just standing out there looking like the guy that's valeting cars at a hotel down the street. And that wasn't his fault. He was 19 years old.
Yeah, that's right. You're going to see Kurt wrestle in singles action against Ric Flair 3 more times on Nitro. Once in October of 99, once in February of 2000, and once in March of 2000. Those matches were in Biloxi, Minneapolis, and Chapel Hill, North Carolina. The one in Biloxi went 10.5 minutes, but this one actually got really rave reviews. We know these guys have great history together. Of course, they were together on Rick's Loser Leaves, the WWF match. What do you think it is about Kurt? Because it does feel like every now and again he would find an opponent and he just had great chemistry with them. I know you were really fond of his matches with Nick Bockwinkel. I loved his matches against both Flair and Bret Hart. But it felt like Kurt had 2 speeds. Like there was one speed where he was engaged, like you see right there. He just cut an entire flip for a Ric Flair chop. And then other times, maybe less engaged. Did you see both Kurts in your time in WCW with him?
I did. Of course, Kurt, the Kurt Hennig when he first got there. And I remember when I signed Kurt, he came to Atlanta and came up to my office with his dad, Larry the Axe Hennig. And his dad is very imposing. But, of course, I was familiar with Kurt. I didn't know Kurt on a personal basis, but I was very, very familiar with him. Not only from being in WWE, but he was a Robbinsdale guy. Actually went to high school with my wife. So I certainly was aware of Kurt, but more from being a fan and watching him emerge in AWA. And it wasn't like, fanboying at all with Kurt, but I was still that, wrestling fan in me came out when he was sitting there next to his dad, Larry the Axe. Kurt, when he first got to WCW, it was awesome, but he was plagued with injuries, and with the injuries came additional weight, and with additional weight came, a slower match and not being able to sell quite as well. And the injuries are really what got to Kurt more than anything else. And I think probably had a lot more to do with what could be perceived as an off again, on again type of performance. Was really more about the injuries. Yeah, chemistry, of course. Chemistry always matters. But I think a lot more had to do with the injuries and the lack of mobility. Kurt's strength was selling. And I do think the additional weight and as a result of the injuries kind of slowed him down quite a bit. And I think people probably perceive that as just maybe not being quite as into the match, but I don't think that's fair.
Well, here comes the figure 4, and Boyd Knoxville's into it. Here comes Barry Windham to break it up. And, of course, referee Pee Wee Anderson's going to call for the bell. A couple of quick questions here. John Thompson III says, what if Mankind decided to jump ship to WCW after winning the WWE Championship? Would WCW would have survived by the new champion acquisition? Okay, I think what we're talking about is here, if you had an opportunity to have someone jump from WWF to WCW, and instead of throwing the women's title in the trash can, we're going to throw the actual world title in the trash can. Would you have done that? Of course, these type of questions come your way because you signed Bret Hart when he still technically was the world champion. And, well, Vince McMahon used what you did with Medusa as a reason to say, oh, here's the justification to screw Bret Hart. What say you? Would you have done some sort of world title in the trash can bit with their world champion?
And what time period?
Any and all, ever.
Before we got sued in federal court, sure I would have. After we got sued, no, I wouldn't have, because I wouldn't have been able to. There were quite a bit of limitations on what I could and couldn't do, and people watching over my shoulder once the lawsuit became a reality. So the answer really depends on when. Prior to the lawsuit, I hadn't done anything. I wasn't afraid of anything. All bets were off. But that changed, as I said, as a result of the lawsuit.
John Thompson III says, fantasy booking, China versus Medusa would have been great in WCW 99. I agree with that. Ask Obama wants to know, what are your thoughts on Barry Darsow and Bill Eadie?
Love, I know Bill Eadie. I don't know him well. Barry Darsow, I know a little bit better. Again, went to high school in Robbinsdale. Got to know his son quite well. Pretty good friends with Barry. We don't stay in close contact, but we see each other on the road from time to time. So I've got nothing but great things to say about Barry. Great worker. He's a big guy. He's bigger than he appears to be sometimes, but an amazing worker, smart guy, very talented, and fun to work with, and a great duck hunter, I may add. So there's always that.
Eric, they announced tonight on AEW Dynamite that they're going to be doing Ricochet versus Swerve Strickland in a couple of weeks in Atlanta. I think that's going to be going down February 5th. What do you think of the way they've used Ricochet so far, and the idea that they're pairing him with Swerve Strickland, who you and I just a few months ago thought, man, they're going to build the entire promotion around him. I don't know that still is the plan, but with Ricochet being across the ring from him, I'm at least curious. What do you think of that pairing?
Well, if there's no story behind it, it's hard to get excited about it. You just look at it as a potential match. I enjoy watching Ricochet. I think his promos are his Achilles heel. He's got a long way to go before he should be on a mic. But I do enjoy watching him in the ring. He's just athletically, he's impressive. It'll be interesting to see what when I say chemistry, I don't mean personal chemistry, but I mean match chemistry looks like between Swerve and Ricochet. If Ricochet's as good as a lot of people that have his abilities are at making other people look good. It can be an exciting match. It could also suck. So we'll have to see.
Here he comes, the big show, or he's about to be in 5 weeks. It's the Giants' last match in WCW. And this is the last time you're going to see him on that iconic Nitro ramp. The last time you'll see him in WCW. The last time you'll see him.
Awesome. That's just impressive singlet. Like, oh.
Are you being funny? I love it.
You love the singlet?
Dude, it's Andre. I mean, he's trying to channel his inner Andre.
Yeah, I guess.
Like from a nostalgia standpoint, that's what Andre wore. So I was for it. What would you have rather? You like the Captain Insano look? Is that what you like?
No, I was not a big fan of Captain Insano, but I think I would have just gone, with regular tights. To me, the strap thing, I get it. It's nostalgia. Just wasn't buying it from day one. And I think, the whole idea of bringing him out as Andre's son was not the greatest way to introduce him. And any callback to that, it's like you come up with a really bad idea and a bad way of introducing a brand new character, especially somebody like Paul White, and you kind of saddle him with the son of Andre thing. It's bad enough that you did it, but do you need to keep calling back to it?
Thanks a lot, Terry.
Nobody bats 1,000 when it comes to
well said. I ain't arguing that at all. We see the fun entrance here from the outsiders. We got Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. Of course, Kevin Nash is in his babyface hometown in Knoxville. Not really his hometown, but he went to college here, and it is a homecoming for him, having fun on the way to the ring. And Frank Rosano used the old noodle up here, did a little smart thinking here. You're going to love this, Eric. I asked ChatGPT, what if the finger poke of doom never happened? And it gave me 2 scenarios. If Nash won that night and if Hogan won that night. If Nash won that night, WCW was going to strive. Now, of course, I think he means thrive. But the idea is if, ChatGPT has now scoured the internet long enough that it has decided, Eric, that if the finger poke of doom never happens, WCW is still in business. This is exhibit A, boys and girls, of why AI still has a ways to go, because that could not be further from the truth. My goodness.
Oh, Elon. No, that's ChatGPT. That's not Elon. Elon is Grok. I love Grok. I have a lot of fun with Grok.
You play with your Grok a lot?
I spend a lot of time with my Grok.
Has Mrs. B ever caught you playing with your Grok? What'd she think about you playing with your Grok?
She gets a kick out of it because oftentimes I find things that make me laugh. And she's wondering what the hell I'm laughing at.
And then she knows Eric's playing with his Grok again.
Yeah.
He's tickled.
Just Grok it again.
John Thompson III says China and Scott Hall's deaths were mental health and addictions. It's no joke. Please talk to each other and help each other change people's futures. Remember, love gives you power and true championship success. Hey, look at John doing some motivational speaking here. Yeah, listen, mental illness is real, and it's so crazy to see, a guy like Scott Hall, who we know was just, the coolest guy on the entire program, and he's no longer with us. I just don't think any of us would have ever even imagined that. Luis Martinez says, hey, Eric, how did you become such a great on-screen character? I saw a clip from Dutch and even Cornette saying how phenomenal you were as a GM and how easy it was for you compared to how horrible Russo was. Did you take acting classes? Why do you think you were just a natural for being on camera so much, Eric? Is it from your modeling days early in life or what?
Oh, probably a little bit of everything. I think being good on camera is just a matter of being comfortable. And part of being comfortable is just repetition and almost forgetting that there's a camera there. I spent a lot of time on camera before I got anywhere near decent. There was a lot of horse shit. There was a lot of really bad television before some of my stuff got to be pretty entertaining. It takes a while. It's just repetition. It's no different than a golf swing or flying an airplane or doing anything else. That it's just repetition. And the other part of it is I got to play myself. I wasn't really playing a character. I was playing myself with the volume turned up, which is not acting. I guess it is performing. I wouldn't consider it acting. It's just performing. And I just got comfortable doing it. And through trial and error, you realize the things that work. Sometimes it's just a little look or the gimmick in a pointing your dimples and smiling with a cheesy smile. Whatever it is, you find the audience reacting to certain little things, and then over and over and over again, you keep adding little things to your character based on what you figure out works and doesn't work doing it live. And eventually, if you survive long enough, you get half-assed good at it. There was no classes, or I didn't pattern myself after anybody or anything like that. It was just go out there and suck for a couple of years and hopefully keep your job long enough to get halfway decent at it.
The high point of the show here when it came to the ratings, believe it or not, or actually the high point for the Raw show was Mankind and Kane, which is a title match. And that does, what a rating, 5.93. But the return to the Undertaker segment, which is horrible and does the sacrifice bit, does a 5.83, and that beat Ric Flair and Kurt Hennig by more than 2 full points. And Meltzer would say, if you're wondering why Flair, who's been WCW's top ratings draw the past 2 years, got devastated that badly, it's because he had already done an interview and a second skit during the show, but nobody had seen Undertaker on TV for 4 weeks. Nobody, not even Austin or McMahon or Hogan or Goldberg, can maintain ratings power at the end if they're the main force of the show, if they've been overexposed during the bulk. What do you make of that? Like, I know that when we talked to Bruce Pritchard, he had mentioned before that when he first went to work for Vince, man, they'd have these marathon TV tapings where they do Challenge and Superstars and everything else. And they might be there 4 or 5 hours, but the announcers would always keep teasing, and don't forget, fans, stay tuned in our main event tonight. Hulk Hogan is here. The idea is they knew that if they ran Hulk Hogan out there first, some of those families are going to say, we got to get the kids to bed. They got school tomorrow. We got to get out of here. But they needed the building to look full. So they kept doing that Hogan tease, getting them to stay to the end. So Bruce has told us about that on Something to Wrestle. From a television standpoint, you've told us how important it is to have an A story, a B story, a C story, and whenever possible to have like a story-long thread. Chat me up about that. Is that different from a live perspective and keeping the fans engaged to a television perspective? Or is Dave onto something here that if you have the same talent appearing in multiple segments, naturally the news going to wear off?
No, Dave is once again up his own ass with stupid comments. He doesn't know. He didn't know then. He still doesn't know what makes television work. I would agree with Dave's premise if we're talking about Ric Flair going out in front of the live crowd early in the show or in the middle of the show and then coming back out again in the end. Then that would be true. But to suggest that someone's showing up in a segment that is a thread leading up to something later on in the show makes no sense at all. It's not, they're 2 different scenarios. I would argue, depending on how well it's done, of course, that seeing someone like Ric Flair in a scene, in a skit, whatever you want to call it, in an angle earlier on the show, as long as it's backstage and it's on tape, only enhances the reaction to that talent once they're live. So I would agree if we're talking about Ric Flair going out and doing something in the ring live and then coming out at the end of the night live. That live reaction is never going to be the same the second time out, very likely. But that's not true when you're talking about pre-tape segments, whether you're sitting at home or whether you're sitting in the audience. They're 2 different things.
Oh, look at you showing up to do commentary in the last segment of the show. Nitro, believe it or not, on this night did win a quarter hour. Believe it or not, it was Scott Steiner and Diamond Dallas Page. That got a 5.5, and that was the high point for Monday Nitro. Meanwhile, we saw the Ken Shamrock angle with Val Venus and Billy Gunn. And we also saw X-Pac and Al Snow. So DDP and Scott Steiner proving they are indeed draws, a 5.5 here. By the way, the actual main event, if you're wondering, That final quarter hour with the McMahon video and the start of the corporate rumble does a 5.06. So Raw overall does a 5.5, which is broken down with a 5.46 and a 5.54. That's a 7.98 share. Nitro loses, but man, just barely. It does a 4.99, which is a 5.87 first hour, which is bigger than anything on Raw. And then a 4.9 second hour and a 4.29 third hour and a 7.16 share. Eric, in today, what would a 4.99 rating represent? Just the total number of viewers, if you had to guess.
Well, just multiply it by probably 1.5 or 6 at that point in time. So,
wow, okay.
In terms of
so
total,
millions and millions and millions of people watching here, and we're seeing as the NWO is out here, we're spray painting up the Big Show or the Giant. This is his swan song in WCW, and man, he's doing the honors. He's taking care of business the right way. Any qualms about the finish here?
none whatsoever. I think we did the best we could with what we had, and Paul did his part. He was a pro. A lot of respect for him.
This was indeed the go-home show for NWO Sold Out, or I guess at this point it's just called the Sold Out pay-per-view. And we're hoping to sell it out next week because we're going to be back talking about the rise of Goldberg. Finally, we've been teasing it. We've been talking about it. We've been bragging about it, and it's finally coming your way next week. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we do, we want to get to a few more questions here. We'll finish up. Want to shout out to RJ. Thank you for being a member for 8 months. Greatly appreciate that. Proto Man says, was Eric aware of how close Shawn Michaels was of jumping ship and what he could have done with him besides hanging out with Hall and Nash? You said before you thought there may have been trouble and you weren't really motivated to bring him in. Do you remember him ever calling the office or reaching out directly?
Never happened. He never made a move. I never made a move. I was hoping that he didn't try. I was hoping that Scott and Kevin didn't want him to come in because it was not the right time for him to be a part of WCW. But it never got close. I don't know. Again, it's just narrative. There was never a conversation, any kind of a serious conversation. Scott and Kevin may have talked to him, but that's not what I would consider a serious conversation.
Vin says, Eric has praised Dave as one of the best historians. Does Eric thinks Dave's history assessment may now be off or biased given how much we've seen him flop and be careless in recent years? Do you think there's been an evolution of Dave Meltzer, or have you always sort of held him in the same regard you do now?
No, he knows his history. He's good at two things in the wrestling business, eulogies and history. His observations and his commentary about what works and what doesn't work in television and in business in general is completely off the wall. And I think he's come off the rails. I think so much is, Dave's been exposed. He's an older guy. He's a year or two younger than I am. Dave had the luxury during the bulk of his, if you want to call it a career, I'll call it an existence. He's had the luxury of nobody being able to call him out on his bullshit. And fast forward, here we are. We've got podcasts, we've got digital, we've got X, we've got Instagram, we've got all kinds of people that were there and have done it who can now call out Dave's bullshit. And now the fans are calling out Dave's bullshit. So I think Dave is realizing that the curtain is kind of falling on his ability to con the audience and, convince people that he knows things he really doesn't know. It's becoming more and more obvious every day to everyone. And all you got to do is look at some of his commentary and then follow the comments that are part of it. It's pretty obvious that people aren't buying his bullshit anymore.
Well, we appreciate John Thompson buying our bullshit. He just gifted 5 memberships to 83weeks.com. And we greatly appreciate you, John. And I want to throw you a 2 sweet. Thank you guys very much. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications bell, because next week, guess what? We're doing it live right here on YouTube, totally free. The Rise of Goldberg. Why was Mike Tenay really behind the streak of Goldberg? What was the early Bill Goldberg like compared to what he became? Did he change? We'll find out next week. And we're going to get to the bottom of that infamous match between Goldberg and William Regal. What's real? What's not? We're also going to ask the hard-hitting questions like, why pad the wins? We were all counting along, and then all of a sudden there were more wins than we could keep up with. We'll talk about it all next week right here on 83weeks.com. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications bell. And we'll see you next week right here on 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff.